everyone. Welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show, the show where you can call in and you can explain why there are only 3 colours in the rainbow. You could call in and explain why you don't have any definition for sex, which results in a binary categorization. You could call in and explain to me why you don't have any evidence that banning trans people from the toilet would benefit cis people. Why don't you do those things? And you can talk to some real trans people and tell us and embarrass yourself in front of the entire world, or maybe embarrass us and prove us wrong, finally, after all of these years. And this week you could talk to me, Katy Montgomerie, resident dickhead, and...
myself, Arden Hart, also a dickhead. What's up, everyone?
The other resident dickhead.
That's right.
That's how we tell the difference.
It's not an exclusive position.
Yeah. Everyone at the line is a dickhead. That is why you should like and subscribe. That's why we do the shows, to be honest. But yeah, Arden, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well today. Got a lot of cool stuff going on at the line. We're trying to make, if some of you saw on Twitter, I posted that little graphic of us. So we're trying to make new things like that you guys can start seeing on social media beforehand to try to get a little bit more draw on each show. But they're
hopefully with a better picture of me.
Right. I know Katy doesn't like her picture. We'll work on it. We'll get a new one. But yes, I'm doing pretty good. How's your week been? I know I wasn't on screen, but I was here last week, so like I heard the update.
This week has been pretty hilarious actually, because several prominent gender critical people have said something absolutely ridiculous. And I've just quite enjoyed it. Which is what I was referencing at the start. I don't know if anyone saw today on Twitter, but we had like one of the top names in gender critical biology apologetics look at a spectrum of colours and claim that there was only 2 there. And then today we had some professor idiot guy say, just pretty much come out with, I don't need evidence, which claims, it's just things I've been hammering home on more recently, is kind of really trying to refine the issues that are worth talking about. And probably why last week, if you saw the show, when someone called in to ask about some pronouns rubbish, I just think, like, just call people what they want to be called and fuck off. Like, no argument or discussion you can have about this is interesting. But what we could do is talk about your ideology, which claims all people can be split into one of 2 categories, yet you can't give a definition that does that. Like, that's an interesting, like, just call in. You could ring in right now. You could be the first caller. You could be, I have a binary definition of sex that doesn't have exceptions. And we could take you and you could just read it out, and me and Arden would be destroyed live on air, because it would suddenly, we'd both detransition, like more penises would grow out than we've ever had before. It would just be the end of times. But I like it. That's an issue that just destroys a large section of the anti-trans core ideology. And then just other things like, if you have evidence that taking away trans people's rights makes cis people's lives better, then we can have a discussion about how many trans people's lives we have to ruin. Like, what's the value of trans people's lives versus cis people's lives? But the problem is, you don't have any evidence. And you all know it. You all know you don't have a definition. You don't have any evidence. And that's why we just have these same boring conversations over and over again on Twitter. And let's just hammer home and finish it. Also, I can hear myself echoing back. I don't know if you can hear that.
I can't hear that, but thank you for letting me know. Okay. I'll try to keep my headphones
just a little
down.
Bit, just a little bit. But yeah, so I just tweeted this out, like, call in and explain one of these things. Got loads of people replying. Don't know if anyone's shown up to watch the opening section, but call in. Just call in and do it. Stop being a wuss. Like, stop being a coward. Stop writing some bullshit like, oh, we've already told you 100 times. Just call in and tell me you're live on air. Like, and tell Arden too, and tell everyone in chat who also has yet to see this mystical alleged definition or this explanation of where all the evidence is that you don't have. Like, come on, let's go.
Think of how devastating it would be to have us get that publicly on air. Like, you can see the reactions in our faces and everything.
Live.
Yeah, that's
not
right.
Even edited. The only way the only calls we ever edit out is when we get those saddos to queue up for like a full hour just to say the N-word or something. And then then you're just gone. You're just gone from the show. But if you call in and humiliate us, I mean, that'll just it'd be a good clip, wouldn't it? Like, it's owned by a cis person. He's just going to put it up for clicks anyway. So,
Right.
anyway, I am ranting already.
Yeah, you're in good form. I love that. I knew my mic was a little bit low, so let me know how the sound is. I adjusted it a little bit. So also let me see. Well, no, I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to ruin the show. All right. So
you already ruined the show by doing it.
I know. I really have. That is my special skill. So if you guys don't know, every week we like to do a poll to talk about something relevant or general to the trans community, just to kind of get conversation started. It also is like fodder for calls, maybe some content if you want to call in, but you're not sure exactly what to call about. That is a good way to get some ideas. So let's look at last week's poll, which is garnering quite a good reaction from the community. It reads, do you think Graham Linehan's wife will come back to him once he's finally destroyed the transes? 10% said yes, 90% said no.
3,000 votes.
3,000 votes. So my favorite comment on this that I saw was someone saying that he gets bullied and gets death threats over this, and we should not be joking about it, which is hilarious, like detached from reality irony that I can't even handle.
Just to be clear, because that's going to get clipped. Death threats are not hilarious. What is hilarious is the idea that, like, he goes around bullying people every single moment that he's awake, and like causing these horrible pylons and accusing people of being pedophiles and stuff. And then he's like, "Oh, stop taking fun of me. Oh, it's hurting my feelings." Like, in return,
obviously death threats are always bad. Don't do death threats. Death threats should never be happening. If you're doing death threats, you're stupid and bad. I'm sorry, my bad for assuming that that's a given of any position. It's just the notion that, yes, the person who perpetuates the very things that somebody was, wanting to defend him over, like that's what the argument they're going to go with. There were a few comments saying that, they liked maybe some of his previous work, but that they've seen the things that he's done since then, and they find that really objectionable. So pretty much, I mean, obviously 90%, everyone is pretty much on our side at laughing at Graham Linehan. So good community.
I mean, there's like, say, oh, stop asking stop making jokes at his expense. I mean, he is a comedian that makes jokes at people's expense, and the whole reason he spiraled into madness is because he made a joke at trans people's expense. But also, his wife wouldn't be able to come back to him if she hadn't left, and she wouldn't have left if he hadn't have lost his mind trying to ruin trans people's lives. So that's his problem.
Yeah. So that was last week's poll, and this week's poll. Do you want to read this one? And
Yeah, let's do it. So this one's a bit US focused. I'm sure everyone watching is English and Welsh and maybe Scottish, but there will be some Americans, because there are some Americans on Earth, and they might know about this. So do you think laws restricting bathroom access for trans students is a violation of federal law or their constitutional rights? And I guess my answer, without knowing anything, and then you can tell me I'm wrong, is it's either a violation of the law or the Constitution, or those things are wrong. That's the two options.
That was kind of why I phrased it the way I did. I know sometimes we try to stray away from polls that are kind of phrased like this, but in this case, I thought it would work because even if you think they're not a violation of federal law or their constitutional rights, that doesn't mean that the laws are good or acceptable or that we should be endorsing them. But this is coming from there was a law, I believe in Indiana, that had been passed to try to restrict access to to trans people using the bathroom of their gender. And that got moved up to an appeal, which shut down that law. They're not able to, or froze it, or whatever the correct terminology is. They're not able to implement the law. And then they tried to appeal that to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declined to comment on it. And the reason this is kind of interesting is because there have been a lot of mixed responses from the courts with regard to laws like this. Some of them have stood, some of them have been shut down on similar grounds. And the Supreme Court hasn't really weighed in on any of them. And that's kind of the point of the Supreme Court, is when we have situations like this, to lay their opinion out. That way, that is like, for going forward for similar laws, people already know that's where the Supreme Court is coming from. And so this leaves us in kind of a weird spot. Them not commenting on this could be, in some sense, a good thing. Like, there's really no valid legal route by which we can do this. And so let's just hands off this idea altogether. But it could also be them waiting for the right pitch to come to their table that would thoroughly smack down trans rights and trans people's access to spaces like this altogether. It's really hard to know without them commenting on it. I feel relatively hopeful because I think there's a slight edge out win with the courts smacking down laws like this. But again, some of them have stood, so it's really hard to know exactly what the approach is. I would suspect this is a violation of their constitutional right. So when Obama was president, I know he tried to get sex in the, I think is it the 14th Amendment? I can't remember which one. The Civil Rights Amendment, to include, for the sex portion of that, to include gender identity. So discrimination based on sex would include protecting trans people. And with Trump, they tried to redefine that where sex is exclusively referring to someone's birth sex. But then I think it doesn't really change much of anything because, like, even if, let's say, we're referring to trans people exclusively as their birth sex, if you're denying a trans boy access to the boys' locker room, to, you know, when he's at school, you're still kind of discriminating him on the basis of sex. So there's a lot of ways these laws can be interpreted and the ways that the rulings can go. But I thought this was just a good food for thought and conversation that we could kind of start here about what people think the federal law says or the Constitution says, and even if that's relevant in the conversation about should these laws be a thing. Yeah, so Aaron, do you have any other thoughts to add to that, Katie?
Yeah, I guess if you're new to this conversation, if you're like, oh yeah, I know what this says, maybe you're like confident that it defends trans rights or whatever, and then you encounter someone who is equally confident or more confident than you who says, oh, trans people are already banned by the Constitution or whatever, that's why they haven't taken this law. It's worth knowing that in the UK, we do have like an explicit protection to use the right spaces. There is some grey areas explicitly mentioned in the law as well, where trans people can be excluded in certain single case-by-case examples, which has never been used in court ever, but it is there. However, we do have general protection for these kinds of things. And even though we have that, and not only even though we have that, but also even though the anti-trans people are trying to change that law, like that's one of their goals, they will still argue that the law already bans us from those spaces because transphobes and gender critical people just lie about everything all the time. And I know, I feel like whenever I watch any political like content stuff on YouTube, the person who I end up watching just accuses their opponents of lying all the time. And I guess maybe everyone in politics just lies all the time. And that's why whenever you're talking about politicians, it's very easy to accuse them of lying. I'm sure the Democrats lie all the time. Labour certainly lie all the time. So it's not just a right-wing thing or a conservative thing. However, like lying about trans rights in the UK is literally the core thing. It's their main propaganda thing. They say, if we allowed trans people to do this, then it would be bad. And they're framing it like that so they can say, they can reverse the burden of proof and say, so you've got to prove to us that trans people are safe and you can't do that because we want to ban you anyway. So blah. But they're lying because they know that trans people already use, you know, the right spaces for them, because they're literally at the same time as arguing, if we allow you to do this, it will be chaos. At the same time as arguing that, they are saying the law today allows trans people to use, you know, trans women to use women's spaces, and we need to change the law. So they're knowingly lying. I mean, lots of the rank and file grunts who just argue anything with an anonymous profile picture, they have no idea, that they're too stupid and they don't care if they contradict themselves. But the big names who are saying this stuff on the radio, they know they're lying. And so when it comes to this like constitution and federal law stuff, law is really complicated. I'm sure the constitutional law is incredibly complicated in the USA. But at the same time, when you see some, you know, reactionary dickhead saying trans people are already banned, they're lying. Even if that was true, they're just making it up because they just say what they want all the time anyway. So, yeah.
Right. And all of this is also besides the point of, let's say that, you know, they decide that trans people have no right to those spaces and that they make a law banning them. Like, how you actually enforce that law is a whole other problem that is like just a whole other rabbit hole to go down, you know, like Are we going to be having your sex identifier card marked on you, like pink triangles out here? Or are we going to have like examinations at the bathroom, or, militia, like some dude standing by with a weapon near the bathrooms? Like, yeah, even once we get past this point and grant them that all of their, end goals are, let's say we give you your society, how you actually implement restricting these spaces is extremely complicated, and like they don't have any proposed solutions to them that are like viable at all, that aren't deeply reminiscent of some very terrible times in human history where we mass extinguish groups of people.
There are three options like for policing this stuff. Like the only three, not me just saying you're only allowed these three options, but there's only three ways you could ever deal with this stuff. One is to have like some kind of explicit documents, legal checks, like you have to show your passport to go to the toilet, the state stops you from changing your passport, it's based on your genitals at birth, and every single time you go you have to show it, something like that, some kind of preventative thing, which is completely ridiculous in any situation that you can imagine at all. Then another one is just letting society decide. So if you see someone who looks like a trans person who shouldn't be there, you then cause a fuss, call the police, whatever, and then it's dealt with like on the spot by reaction happening in the process of what unfolds in that moment. And that means that's just obviously bad, where you're encouraging random drunken men to start accusing women who are slightly too tall of being predators. Right. And I mean, we're already seeing some of this stuff happening anyway, without the state officially endorsing it. And then the third option is what we have today in the UK, which is self-ID, which is obviously terrible, but obviously is the best step. I mean, I recently asked a poll to some the wider gender critical followers of mine, which is quite a few, in the way they phrase it. And I often ask them, like, what do you want? Instead of like, because we say, oh, well, where's these bathroom guards going to come from? And they're like, I don't want bathroom guards. Don't be ridiculous. You're straw manning me. It's like, okay, so what do you want? And they're like, just use the right space for your sex. I'm like, that is self-ID. You're telling me to just use the right space. I'm just using the right space. And you disagree on what the right space for me is, but I disagree on the amount of talking you're doing, so shut up. So, but you can disagree with me all you like, but that doesn't... Well, I mean, what are you going to do? You're either going to, like, create a law which allows you to lock up trans women because they don't have the right documents, in which case the majority of trans people are going to be breaking the law every single day and will, you're going to need to build some camps to house us all. Or you have random men approaching women and getting aggressive, or you let us carry on doing what we do today. Like, they're literally the only options. Can you come up with a fourth option? Good. Call in. But I'm sure you can't, because I've been asking this question for 6 years. So
right. Well, we do have calls on the line, and I want to get to them because there's some interesting ones today lighting up.
I'm in rant mode, callers.
Before we do calls, really quick, I want to mention that Transatlantic is not the only show on the line. As I turn to face my glorious schedule for the next week, this Sunday at 2 p.m., Sunday show will be with Jimmy and Matt. This Monday on Skep Talk will be Erica Gutsick-Gibbon with a unconfirmed guest. Next Wednesday on The Hang Up will be Matt with Brady Goodwin. That is Fanatic. He was the former Christian rapper who's now does a bunch of atheist activism stuff. So that's really cool. I like him a lot. And then next week right here on Takis will be me and Hannah Reloaded. So if you saw The Hang Up episode a while back with Jake, it's kind of like we're bringing them back together into the skeptic fold. I think they still both do a lot of that, but I just think too highly of us. I don't know. And then lastly, linemerch.com is the thing now. We have some actual merchandise on linemerch.com that aren't just mugs. There are 2 sweaters up, which are like the Line special design hoodie. I don't have the promo thing. I'll put it up later. There is a generic You're on the Line shirt and a new, simpler, smaller mug that is also dishwasher safe, because I know some people were saying that the other ones weren't. I haven't seen any problems.
You need a screen to put up.
I know. I
show
have
it
one
all.
made too. I had it on the hang up last night and I didn't put it in this beforehand, but maybe if I keep talking for long enough, it'll give me time to scour through my files and find it so I can put it up.
You could do it while I'm on a rant with one of the callers.
Yeah, here, let me well, no, actually I have to do something else too before that's ready. So let's move on, take a couple callers. We'll do another little moment after that. So who do you want to take first? A lot of these are potentially interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly do 11-6, and I definitely want to do 4-3. And I'm interested to see where 7-2 is going, I guess.
Yeah.
So, you got any?
Yeah, why don't we do 11-6? Let's take the heavy hitter.
Okay.
Right off the bat.
We're going to talk to Robert in, I think, Ohio. Is that right? OH?
Yep.
Who wants to talk about the purpose of identifying as a trans man or woman instead of just identifying as a man or woman. Robert, go for it. You're on the line.
Hi, it's good to talk to you guys. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you great. Thanks for calling.
Cool. So, yeah, I talked to the screener. It was very nice, by the way. And I just wanted to kind of let it out at the start, just for full disclosure and transparency. So I'm a Christian, and I have, I guess, pretty just run-of-the-mill standard views on stuff like sex and gender and that sort of thing. You can probably guess, what those are. But I'm, I guess, reaching out because I know this is a good place to call if I want to kind of learn more and, kind of expand my knowledge of this thing a bit. So if I feel like I'm pushing back on anything, or if I accidentally say something offensive, it's not.
No, it's still great, Robert. Don't worry. You're all good.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being open and stuff about stuff you're concerned about at the start, but I'm not going to be prejudiced. I know plenty of Christians who don't have garbage views on trans people, and loads who do, who are still willing to listen and have a discussion. And there's nothing you can say that would be worse than what some people have said to me recently. Anyway, so you're all good. Go for it. What is your question?
So, when someone identifies as a trans man or trans woman, just leaving the non-binary out of it for a moment, what does that mean as opposed to just identifying as a man or woman? Because in my mind, that kind of makes a distinction between someone who's a trans man or woman and someone who's, I guess, a cis man or woman. So I guess what's the distinction in the mind of a trans person when they say that? Because from what I feel, and I'm not trans, obviously, or else, I'd probably understand this a little more.
Maybe not.
Every time I would be identifying as a trans man or trans woman, I would be reminding myself oh, I'm identifying as this, but I have to go through this transition process, whereas other men and women don't have this same experience, I guess. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm
totally understand you. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Arden, do you want to go first, or shall I?
I have thoughts. I mean, first of all, Robert, thank you you've been very respectful thus far, and I appreciate you calling in with this approach. This is what this show is for, so it makes me happy when people like you call in. In my eyes, to say the difference between trans woman and woman or trans man and man is not too different from the difference between disabled woman and woman, where it is, I am just further describing a characteristic about my womanhood. I definitely would agree. There's sort of a conception that when trans women say we're women, that we're saying we're cis women. And I definitely am not saying that. And I don't think most trans people are saying that. I do think you kind of get into some hairy spots when you start talking about like, what's the purpose of making these distinctions? You're sort of creating hierarchies in some sort of way, I think, to some people. But really, to me, trans is just an adjective. I'm a woman, and trans just describes an aspect of my life experience that I was assigned male at birth for me. Although I think for some trans people, it could be like also referring to like starting from a place of being like intersex or non-binary or something. So yeah, that's kind of where my thought is at the start of conversation. Pass it off to Katy.
Yeah, so something that I've said a few times on this show, so sorry for the regular listeners, but I think it's good to say it a lot, is that I only really care about how people describe themselves for one of two reasons. One would be if they're someone I've met at the pub and I'm trying to make friends, or, it's someone's new partner or something, and they just want to tell me about their life. And they might say, oh, I'm a gay person, and, I'm an Irish person, and I'm a trans person. They telling you things about your life, and it's interesting to learn about someone. And in that way, cool. If you have a thing and you want to describe it to me in the way you think best suits you, I'm all for it. That's interesting. However, the main reason I care is not on an individual level, though I obviously care about all my friends and family, but it's on like a sort of wider group level. Like the reason I care at all that some people are trans people and some people aren't is because trans people face extra hurdles in their lives, extra discrimination, extra risks as they go about their life. And I don't think that should exist. I don't think anyone should be born into a group where they just have less rights and freedoms, because I think it's just bullshit. And I think if we didn't have these words, some people would just randomly have worse lives than others, and there'd be these patterns there, but it'd be so hard to fight back and cure the problems, which, all of these problems we've caused as people, if we don't have words for it. So what we can do is we can look around and be like, oh, there's all these people and they're all experiencing this one specific type of prejudice, but when they try and get healthcare, often they're met by people who are just like, no, you can't have that healthcare, even though they would give the same healthcare to other people asking for the same things. And it turns out that that's a form of transphobia. Trans people, a good example is, for example, breast augmentation. A trans woman can go in and ask for bigger boobs and often just be told no, or you need 2 psychologist evaluations, or you need to be signed off as sane, whereas the cis woman who went and asked for the same thing wouldn't. And we can argue about whether plastic surgery should be a thing, or whether the beauty industry is causing these issues, but the point is there is an extra hurdle, and that's just an easy example, but there are these hurdles in front of trans people all over the place, from trying to get a job to trying to adopt to trying to get a home and all these other kinds of things. And so that's why I find this word useful. And so when I talk about trans people and talk about being a trans person, I'm doing it like for a political reason. I'm saying there are people like me who aren't all the same as me. Like, the trans people are all different, and they all have, other different problems, and all of these problems intersect, because obviously, like, I'm a white person, so I don't experience any racism, and that makes things a whole lot harder when you have 2, 3, 5, issues in which you're prejudiced against. But I at least can say other people who face these issues, we should organize together and discuss these issues together and come up with a solution, and then tell everyone who isn't affected by these about these problems, and hopefully some of them will be able to empathize with us, and we'll fight like for our freedom and rights and stuff too. So that's why it's like, if someone said, what are you? Who are you? How do you identify as? I wouldn't be like, a trans woman. I don't think I would say that to most people, not because I'm ashamed of it or because I don't think it's true or whatever, but just because that's just not the first thing. Like, I wouldn't say I was a right-handed woman. I wouldn't say I was a right-handed white person. Like, they aren't my top 2 things. They're both true. Like, I am British, and some people think that's a bad thing, but it's not something I would lead with in a conversation. I would say, I'm a heavy metal guitarist or whatever. But if someone said, oh, I'm fighting for trans people's rights to healthcare, I can be like, yes, this affects me. I have had personal experience with this. I can talk on this issue. I can tell you what I have experienced. I can tell you what other people like me I've heard from, some of my friends. So yeah, but I will just add one other thing. So I often talk about those two things, like about an individual and about this group level stuff. But I also think some trans people specifically identify with being trans in a different way politically to the way I often describe it, which is more like a fuck you to society and the rules that it's made, not just like, oh, we should all have equality, which is kind of often how I see the world and how often I describe things, but more like, it's like someone, if someone comes into me and says, are you a man or a woman? Are you trans or cis? Are you gay or straight? I could, tell them the answers to those things and therefore people like me are experiencing discrimination, blah, 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 systematic level. Some people are like, why are you asking me this question? Fuck off. And that's where the word kind of queer has come from, because they're saying, why do we even have these boxes that people get put into? I mean, I think the boxes are necessary for describing prejudice, but beyond that, I don't really think that they're particularly useful. But some people like to specifically identify, it's just like people in a way, they're just wanting to cause a problem. And maybe that makes it sound like I'm saying they're bad, but I actually think that's good because they're causing a problem to a system which is bullshit. So, I don't know. Robert, what do you think to our answers? Has that enlightened anything, or was that just a wall of text?
Yeah, there was a lot there. But I appreciate the long thought out sort of answers, and this will be up on YouTube after everything, so I can always go back and listen 100 times until it all sinks in. But off the top of my head, some things that stuck out that I really appreciate. Katy, you said, like, if someone asks what you are, I don't know how you worded it, but you wouldn't come out and say, like, oh, hey, my name's Katy, I'm a trans woman, unless it's, like, relevant to that, I guess. Like, you wouldn't say you're right or left-handed or your skin color or whatever. That makes sense. And then especially when Arden was like, it's not like a hierarchy thing. It's just an adjective. Like, say there's a woman here, and then there's a disabled woman. It's not that one woman is more of a woman than the disabled woman. It's just they're both women, and one of them has this additional experience on there. And that, when she said that, that was kind of like, that makes a lot of sense, because that was kind of my thought about the thing, was that it seemed to me that saying trans man or trans woman instead of just man or woman kind of, I don't want to say degraded, like, what a woman is, or like made you less of a woman or less of a man or whatever. Like, but like in my head, that was kind of what I was thinking. Like, logically, that kind of connected in my head somehow, and that's why I was,
I think
seeing how you guys.
I think sometimes it can. Like, sometimes it can do. There could be a situation where it does, and there could be a situation where it doesn't. Like, if you were talking to your friends, and one of them was like, "Oh, this new person started at work," and you're like, "Oh, what are they? Who are they or something?" And one of them was like, "Oh, yeah, this new man started," and then the other one was like, no, it's a trans man." Then suddenly it's like, what? Why is this the top piece of information? Why are you saying no? Like, where is it? This kind of feels like you are saying that that's the only thing important about them, and also it's bad. Whereas if someone was like, I'm really struggling with my gender and I don't have anyone to talk to, you might be like, oh, I've got a friend who's a trans man. And then suddenly highlighting it is a good thing and interesting. And I think that one of the things that some people either struggle with or pretend to struggle with is, like, different groups of people and that they are different. Like, often I have transphobes saying to me, like, you think that trans women are identical to cis women. They don't say that because they don't use those words, but they say, you think that trans women are biological women or whatever. And like, I mean, trans women are biological women because we're biological people, because we're not robots and we're not holograms and we're not ghosts or whatever. But my point is, what they're saying, they're effectively trying to communicate is that I think trans women and cis women are the same. And like, I don't think that. It's like when you say men and women should be equal, and they're like, so what? You don't think there's a difference between men and women? It's like, No, there are general differences between men and women, and it's actually quite important that we know the differences because they experience different problems in their lives that we as a society need to fix together. And if we don't, then we don't, we end up with people struggling with all kinds of sex-specific problems that we could just resolve. So there are differences between trans women and cis women generally, but that doesn't mean on an individual level that they necessarily all experience all of those general problems, general groups of things. And also it's like, well, also right-handed and left-handed women, they are different. Like, they are not the same group. They have different things. They are different people. But I think that a lot of people, when they think of different groups of people, they almost treat them like these discrete categories, almost like they're different species, like they're aliens. And so when you say like the way lots of transphobes view the world is there are like cis women and cis men, and then trans women and trans men, and there's like 4 different alien species. Whereas, like, if I said the same about right-handed people, left-handed people, and ambidextrous people, as if they're like totally different aliens, you'd be like, what the hell? It's just, I mean, ambidextrous people are different to left-handed people. They are you trying to say that ambidextrous is the same as left? No. But also, I'm not trying to say that one of them is inherently better than the others, or one of them shouldn't have rights, or, one of them doesn't deserve empathy or something. It's just like, everyone's different, isn't it? And we can just describe people in lots of different ways. Arden,
yeah, the only thing I had to add is I think what's helpful for me visualizing it is like when you watch a lot of, so Matt likes to watch a lot of philosophy videos, and I passively pay attention from time to time. And on an occasion, he's watched some on like set theory, right? Where a way they represent that a lot of times is you'll have like a circle, and then you'll have a circle within that circle. And I think that's kind of how I visualize this thing. Like, women is one circle, disabled women is another circle in that, and trans women is another circle in that. In a lot of cases, these different circles overlap and intersect, and there's people who are fit into both categories, and there's some who don't fit into either. And it's just kind of a problem with like definitions and sets in general that in a lot of cases, you might be able to zoom way out and say things that seem to be true when you are zoomed way out. But then once you zoom way in and start looking at the individuals, it doesn't get quite as clear where those lines are drawn sometimes. So yeah, I think just language is a useful tool, and it makes more sense to refer to trans women in a lot of cases, in most cases, as women. And so trans
or just as people.
Or as people. But I mean, I think similarly to what you were saying about, using these definitions to describe like certain life experiences or oppression, like the woman label applies there just as much as the trans label does. But yeah, they're separate and distinct things. But sorry, Robert, we're talking a lot again. We tend to do that. Go ahead and respond if you want to.
No, it's your show. That's fine. Yeah, no, that's helpful. And so basically, like, if I got this right, like, what you're saying is that the thing that makes you a woman and the thing that makes my mom a woman, it's the same thing, right? Like, it's just like if, if there's the African American woman and a white woman, there's the adjective in front of them that's only relevant for certain contexts, like maybe a medical setting or whatever. But if you're just talking to someone, you don't need to know what their background or their their skin color, whatever is. Just like if you're meeting someone, you're not going to say I'm a trans person unless it's for like a trans advocacy sort of thing, or like something relevant, or maybe relevant for your medical history, or
yeah, I mean, it's probably a little bit like
that.
It's probably a little bit like with you being a Christian. Obviously, it's very important to you, and it's something you wanted to tell us at the start, and that's great. And that you are a Christian man, or a Christian person at least, and that's cool. But sometimes you want to introduce it, and sometimes it's not relevant. And like when you're around all your Christian friends, you probably talk about being Christian a lot. And when you're around people who just random members of the public or whatever, you're not going to be like, hello, I'm a Christian. Like, you might be in some situations, but sometimes, like, who cares?
No,
like,
I get it. Yeah, like if I'm at work or something, and like I meet like a new person, and I shake their hand or say, hey, my name's Robert, give them any information that's relevant about me in terms of work. You know what I mean? I'm not like, I've got 2 cats, I'm a Christian, and, here's my mom's maiden name or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And to specifically respond to, you made this kind of a point about like, are the way that we're a woman the same that the way your mom's a woman? And like, I don't necessarily know that I could like say yes to that, but I also don't know that any 2 people's like experience, perfectly aligns. I think it's fair to say that like trans women experience like misogyny and sexism in society. Like, I take care of a lot of animals. It's not uncommon for me to have to go to the Tractor Supply Company and pick up some 40-pound bags of like pelletized bedding. But on at least one occasion, one man who worked there went out of his way to come out of the building and come up to our car and be like, "I've got this, ma'am," and push me out of the way while he loaded the bags for me, which is like, okay, that's kind of nice, but also like, it's weird that you just went out of your way to assume that I was incapable of lifting a 40-pound bag. Like, it's just like, yeah, I that's kind of where I think the whole like usefulness of like oppression sort of concept comes in, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly pedantic, but just when you were like, "Oh, but so you're like a woman in the same way my mom is," and I'm like, "Well, I don't know about if I would say that exactly, but like kind of at the same time."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, I know everyone has their own. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on.
Yeah, I was saying like my mom had her own struggles growing up or whatever, but she didn't have the struggles of being trans because she was born like as a woman, and she was just so like when I say like, I guess when I make like a distinction of so my mom was born like biologically she's a female. We'd all say she's a female if we're talking like biologically and everything, and she's never said like, "I'm a man, I'm a trans person." She identifies as a woman as far as I can tell. I mean, she uses Mrs. and, basic. So that would be like a cis woman, right? Like, because she was born and
how I usually say it is, if the doctor was like, "It's a girl," and you're like, "I'm a woman," then you're a cis woman. And if the doctor was like, "It's a boy," and you're like, "I'm a woman," then you're a trans woman. Like, I just think like as soon as you try and like people try and come up with these like, if you're like biological sex assigned at birth, but you identify as a gender identity that conflicts with the like, as soon as you start trying to do these more specific definitions, they start getting like, I mean, the more and more specific and prescriptive sounding your definitions get, the more hard edges they have, and then the more likely you are to exclude people. I'm sure there are plenty of trans women who would cringe a little bit at my explanation of what it is, but I mean, that's generally true. It's true enough to know what we're doing when we're to explain it to someone. If I had to tell an alien what a trans person was, that's what I'd do, and I think they'd generally get it. And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we have loads of them on our planet. We put cis people through extra hurdles just to get healthcare. All the cool people are trans on our planet." And I'd be like, "Yes, take me to your leader."
Yeah, I think too, I know some trans people also kind of cringe at like the biological female stuff. I think generally speaking, it's fair to, this kind of goes back to when I was saying, things that apply when we're zoomed out are often different than the things that apply at an individual level. I think it's kind of okay to think generally speaking, humans are sexually dimorphic. Most of them, 99% of them are going to fall into a cis male, cis female, like typical sex characteristics presentation. But and I think it's fine to work under that assumption. It's just not to have that be ironclad and think that it is like it's like written into the universe that human males and females only come in one way. Because once you start looking at individuals, a lot of those laws break down really quickly. I mean, it wouldn't make sense that animals that are sexually dimorphic at one point in their evolutionary history and then are like asexual entire female species, because that's the thing that happens like kind of frequently in the animal kingdom. Like that wouldn't make sense if sex was ironclad in that way, right? So yeah, they're just kind of anyway, some trans people might wince at like biological female, but I don't tend to
without spiraling off into some big long rant. The reason I don't say biological female isn't for some PC woke reason, whatever. It's because I just want a word to describe these groups, like I was saying earlier. And if I said, I'm fighting for the rights of trans people, but I also care about biological people, like, what's a biological person? Like, if I just
Right.
said, my friend, they're a biological person, by the way, they work in the shop, you'd be like, so some of your friends are robots? Like, and it's the same
Yes.
with natal. Like, sometimes people say, oh, she's a natal woman. I'm like, well, so what's a natal person? Someone who was a person at birth. So that's not really a good word for this either. Or like a real, or like some people, that's obviously intentionally more offensive when they say there's trans women and there's real women. It's like, but so are you saying there are trans people and real people? You're saying trans people aren't real people? That is usually what they're saying. But so that's the reason I use the word cis, and the reason why cis makes the most sense isn't because I love Latin, really. It isn't because I, politically attached to this word because I invented it myself or something. It's like I say it because it's a word that already exists, which works in the context of here is a trans man, here is a cis man, but also here is some trans people, here are some cis people. And if someone, some people claim to be offended by the word cis and they're usually lying, but if they were actually offended, I'd be like, okay, so give me another word that works here. And natal doesn't work for the reasons we've said. Biological doesn't really work for the reasons we've said. And then when you just come up with another word, it just means the same as cis anyway. So I'm ranting off about something you didn't want to know about, Robert. I'm sorry. I'm taking up all your time in the call.
No.
Do you have any closing thoughts? Because we probably need to move on.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I appreciate that again. And yeah, like I guess like I'd be considered cis, but like, so when the doctor, because you I believe it was Arden. I'm sorry, this was quite some time ago. One of you said something like, I made the comment like, okay, my mom was born, and the doctor is like, yep, that's a woman, and then my mom was like, yep, I'm a woman. So, like, the doctor wouldn't say this is a man. Like, I know obviously that's not what doctors say, but when the doctor describes when the baby is born and looks at its physical features, without getting too descript, and they make a determination saying, okay, this is usually they say this is, a male or female, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying like, if, let's just say a baby's born and they say it's male, so the baby's male and uses he pronouns, they give it a name like Alan or something, like traditionally masculine name, and then he grows up and he's, a teenager or whatever, and he starts to identify as a woman and, is a trans woman, and has that feeling. I'm not saying they made that choice, just like, I'm sure, like, just like being gay or whatever, like, you're born and you grow up and you learn about yourself, like, oh, I feel this way, and that gives me the identity as gay, or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So would that mean, that would mean they're a trans woman, but would, like, that initial identification that the doctor gave that person, would that be something that comes into effect at any point? Like, let's say they go to a doctor or whatever, and would they have to disclose, like, okay, hang on.
Oh,
so that's why they say, like, assigned male, because the doctor was like,
sorry. Yeah, I think
the doctor was like,
I think this is a really good question. Robert, sorry, Robert, to cut you off. I think it's a really good question, but I think it's like
kind of trailing off. It's clicking a little bit, but you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you're saying, but I think you should call in another time, because you risk me doing another 20-minute rant, and we have other callers on the line. That is a good question, and the answer is sometimes, and it's situational and person dependent. So call in, and we will talk to you next week or another week.
Yeah, I have thoughts, and I want to respond, but Robert, you should definitely call back. I really enjoyed this call, and I think you're a great caller. So thank you for calling in, and we will talk to you soon, okay?
Bye.
Awesome, and thank you guys so much.
Bye, Robert.
No problem.
Oh
So I quite
man,
want to take 4-3, by the way. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I just, we there's always a little bit of anxiety when you're going through the call list and you're like, oh man, that's what that person wants to talk about. All right, I better buckle up. I gotta have my game face on because, it could get offensive and I gotta like compose myself or whatever. But Robert was awesome. Like, it's very rare that I'm like shocked with a caller
He
being
didn't
cool.
say the F word. He didn't say the T word. It's just disappointing, really.
Cookies for Robert. You said 4-3?
Yeah, I think so. Let's take Sean from Scotland. Me and Sean have
Hello.
talked a little bit about this in DMs, but I think
Okay.
it'll be great to hear the full story. Sean, so you want to talk about a time you might have been discriminated against?
Yeah. So back in 2015, I was studying for my master's degree, and I had an offer to study a PhD at my dream university and a subject I really wanted to do it in. I was fully funded, and all I needed to do to get that offer fulfilled was to get a first in my degree, first time round. It was a government-funded project, so I had to start that year. Now, my struggles with my gender started about 10 months prior to that, and I attended the exam presenting as a woman. I put the name that I chose myself in the examination slip, and about 15 minutes in, an invigilator came up to me and asked, "Is this you?" Which I thought, fair enough, they're doing their job. I must have looked pretty conspicuous. So, yeah, I started to panic. It was a touchy subject that I didn't need reminding of in the middle of an exam in maths. So I asked to move to the back of the exam hall, and they let me, and then I just couldn't really take it. So I left the exam hall early, and I ended up failing the exam. I had to resit the exam next year, and I missed out on the first overall, first time round. I did get my first eventually, but I completely missed out on the offer. So sometimes I wonder maybe I could take legal action, or I don't know. I kick myself over it. Sometimes I think that I could have went presenting cis, but I felt compelled. I felt, and I wanted to look my best, to help my confidence. It's a bit of a superficial thing, but maybe it would help in the exam, that sort of thing. Yeah. So that's what happened. But I'm doing a PhD at the moment. I got into a different institution, but yeah, it's something I've thought about for a while. I've asked friends about it on numerous occasions, and one of them suggested recently that maybe I could contact the university at least that I took the exam at, and maybe have them write an official letter of apology. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think?
So yeah, this it's a difficult subject. I totally empathize with your position, by the way. Like, especially when you're first kind of exploring with things and trying to understand yourself, and you're presenting yourself to the world how you want to be, or how you're still exploring or whatever. Looking your best is important, and I think maybe this is harder to communicate to people who have never experienced this, or to maybe cis people. I don't know how you would consider yourself now, cis or trans. I'm not trying to make you make a decision, but just to people who haven't experienced this, you might be just like, well, it's just clothes, isn't it? Like, get over it. But the thing is that how you're respected in society, and in what way people treat you, depends a lot on how you appear to people. And if you're like, trans people are generally very aware of this, and they either just do not want the confrontation and to be treated as lesser sometimes, and so they try and blend in, or they're just like, fuck this, the rules are horrible and I just can't deal with them, and I'm going to ignore them on purpose. But I don't think anyone could say that it's stress-free. Like, dealing with the kind of the judgment and the confrontation and the belittling and stuff that you sometimes get, even like, in this situation you've described, someone's walked up and said, "Is this you?" And then you felt like you need to leave the exam hall, and I can imagine people being like, "Oh, I should have just got over it," or whatever. But that's just bullshit. Like, that sometimes it's just in the way someone communicates something, the tone. Like, I mean, I don't know how they communicated it to you, but if they were like, "Oh, if I think interrupting someone in an exam is bullshit," but if afterwards they've been like, "I'm really sorry, I'm just checking, is this you? Like, is this you? Could it doesn't match your ID or something? That's fine." And oh, cool, great, yeah, that's great. But if they were like, "Excuse me, is this you?" Like that, the same question, totally different phrased, and it's so like it's confrontational, and it's like kind of expressing their distaste for you sometimes. And I experienced this a lot early on in transition, where someone would come over and say something, and it was all about the vibes, how they were doing it. And if I just was to explain the story just as a list of things said, it wouldn't necessarily communicate how intentionally bad they were trying to make me feel and how bad I felt from it. So I totally empathize with your situation, and I can also see myself having a panic. And the thing is, especially when you're already in a stressful situation like an exam or something, it's very easy to get into a panic and to get in your own head and be like, "Oh, now I've already wasted 10 minutes of the exam stressing about this, and I don't have enough time to do all the questions." And like I have been in that position before for other reasons. My issue is like, I totally get this, and I'm glad that it sounds like some of your friends get it too. And I do think that if you were to describe it to the university, like I felt this person was being too confrontational, or I felt like that they were being judging, or they interrupted me at a time they didn't need to, and it threw me off my exam, like that kind of thing, maybe you could get an apology from the university, and maybe that would make you feel a lot better about it. I mean, sometimes these things that don't seem like they should mean much do actually mean much, and it might feel like you can close this chapter. But the idea of legal stuff, maybe I'm just too negative, but I just don't have much faith in the legal system. And I feel like people with really like documented examples of extreme discrimination often just get nothing in a court system. And if you were to take this to court, I mean, at the very least, this is going to be some of your time and some of your stress for maybe something. I mean, what is the best case scenario here? Maybe they give you a payout or something. Maybe they like reimburse your current PhD. Maybe that's would mean a lot to you. But what's the likely outcome is, I mean, maybe nothing. And also the potential negative outcome, I mean, if this become like some news story, I hate saying this because I always think of this and it's very rare, and I wouldn't want this to put anyone off from pursuing justice, but I guess it's just worth thinking about all of the different options and what you actually want from it. If this is still weighing on your mind, then even just telling them like, "Hey, just so you know, this isn't how you should treat trans students in the future," they might be like, "Thank you, we will put this in our next training course or something." And then you didn't get your apology, you didn't get any payback, you didn't get anything, but you maybe have helped people like you in the future. That might be enough to make you feel like you've closed the book on it. Arden, I don't know what you think, or what. I know that the law would be different in the US, but I mean, the law's different in Scotland to England, so it's hard to say.
I it's one of those things. I'm not sure that I even would agree that a law should like punish them for that, because I can imagine there being scenarios where it's actually really necessary and appropriate for for them to do something like that, and they would need to have that right to do it. But I also completely agree that they could have just let you finish the exam unbothered and then addressed it after the fact. So yeah, I think like a letter of apology is probably the best you could hope for, but I don't know Scottish law at all, or UK law, or whatever the difference is. It would seem to me to be weird to have a law restricting that, but yeah, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was saying it was a university in England. I'm studying for my PhD somewhere in Scotland at the moment, so I also it was like 15 minutes into the exam, and it just was such a knock to my confidence. And maybe the way that they, like you said, they could have asked at the end. They were doing their job, and also the tone in which they said it was almost like it was, it was sympathetic to the situation. I give them that, in the sense that it was almost a triumphant, oh, look what you're doing, you're defying the system or what have you, doing this thing. So yeah, so they were just doing their job, I think. But on the other hand, they could have waited, and it set back my career by at least 1 year. So
I think sometimes it can be difficult, but sometimes people with good intentions do stupid or even bad stuff, and I try not to be angry or wanting to punish people who have good intentions and who just do the wrong stuff. Like, I've had people, again, earlier on in my transition, like, ruin my day by just walking up to me in the street and being like, you look really good for a trans woman or something. And I'm just like, oh God, fucking hell. Like, I just want to shoot myself in the face. Like, oh my God, that is the absolute worst thing that's ever happened to me. But the thing is, sometimes it can make me angry because if it happened, like it happens again, I'm just like, oh, just fuck off. Like, but at the same time, I feel like I can't target my annoyance at this person who, they've done something dumb, but they obviously did it because they didn't understand. Maybe they, if they're in an official setting, maybe the institution should have taught them. But in that case, again, it's not the worker. And it, by the sounds of it, from sounding like if they were trying their best and they're being sympathetic and stuff, the worst thing that should happen to them from that understanding of it is that someone should explain to them, oh, can you, just so you know, for next time, don't do this again. And I get that you might feel like your career has been delayed, and that's true. And I mean, this is just one of the examples of where sometimes just being a minority of some kind or not fitting in the rules of society even can just fuck you over just through not following the rules causes problems. And it's like, I guess if you're constantly, if this one thing is weighing on your mind, maybe it'd be good to let go of the anger, or at least direct it away from the person and towards society in general. I mean, that's how I deal with a lot of my anger about people being shit. So I focus on trying to change the world instead. But
I think also, just to validate, how that made you like want to leave the exam hall and all of that like stereotype threat is like a known phenomenon, right? When people of certain minority groups are taking tests and the test taker is person of like the hegemonic majority group, just statistically, on average, they perform worse, not because, that group is bad at the thing, just because there's that threat of being like, oh, I'm a minority person. There's more expectation for me to try to live up to something. Somebody's going to comment on the fact that, I'm a trans person or whatever. Those things are real, and they actually do impact performance. So I hope you don't hold yourself, too much criticism towards yourself for like leaving in that situation, because I think that's a perfectly understandable response. But yeah, I agree with everything else that's been said so far. I don't think I have much else to add. Does that sound good for you, Sean? I mean, I'm sorry we don't have like proper advice or anything, but I think the things you proposed sound like they're probably reasonable roads to addressing things.
I think that really helped.
Good.
I don't have much to add, really. It's great having some more input on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Well,
I look forward to your hard to read math problems.
You're welcome.
Yeah, me too.
Have a nice day, Sean. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
See you. Bye. Bye.
So, do you have this thing ready? Or
I have the thing ready. All right. So we got to talk about thelinemerch.com. Okay. Are you ready for this, people? This is thelinemerch.com. So we have these 4 different designs. The 2 hoodies are the same pattern on different colors. I will say they are pretty expensive, and I know they're going to be out of range for a lot of people in terms of what they cost. The cost to produce them is pretty high, which is part of the reason, and they're very limited run. So if you would like to get those, that is an option. Those are my favorite. But then if you're looking for something that's a little bit more affordable, the You're on the Line and the Line mug are also available. So you can rep your Line support now at linemerch.com. And if you're a patron, you should have gotten a code last night for, I think it's 10% off. So definitely go check that out and grab your Line merch today.
Arden, was that thelinemerch.com or was it linemerch.com?
Linemerch.com. No, the.
Linemerch.com. Okay.
Yep. Linemerch.com. Yeah, so I love that. I designed all of those things actually, but the hoodie is my favorite. I was like, it took me way longer than it should have to get that design right. Like I had the idea and I had a good iteration of it really early on, but getting it to look just right was actually really frustrating. So I'm glad it came out pretty well. But with that, we've got a bunch more colors. Yeah.
7-2, or do you want to go in with 8-4, or
let's take 8-4. I think this person's been waiting to talk about this issue for quite some time. Not quite some time, but anyway.
So this one's got your name in it.
Yes, we're gonna bring in Alex in Washington. Pronouns are she, her. Alex wants to talk about their child who identifies as a cat, because this has come up on several episodes recently. So Alex, you are live. Give it to us. What do we need to hear?
Hi. Yeah. Well, I mainly want to hear your opinions, actually, because you keep saying, someone call in and I have opinions on this, and I don't think our opinions are different, but I don't really have them I do have opinions, but I don't have them really fleshed out in words necessarily, and language is confusing, and identifying as a cat and identifying as a trans person are clearly different things, but
right.
I think both have their validities, if that makes sense,
Yeah. So let me just tell you kind of my thoughts on this, and you can tell me, because I actually don't know anybody who in real life identifies as any sort of animal. So this could be useful because you have that experience, and maybe you can tell me what your kiddo thinks. So
yeah,
in my conception, when somebody says I identify as a cat, I don't really know what that means. You've said before that it's not spiritual, I think, in a comment, and so that's good to know. But at that point, it sounds to me like somebody's just saying, I sort of identify with the anthropomorphic things that I assign to cats, like hissing or climbing trees or something like that, which is fine. And kind of echoing, Matt and Josie on the Hang Up a couple weeks ago were talking about, if this is a way that a kid who's, trying to develop their understanding of their sense of self comes to describe sort of a gendered experience, I don't really object to that. And I'm not going to spend any time, I don't think Therian people are ruining trans advocacy or are something that people should advocate against in any meaningful way. All of my activist energy is going against, fascism and the GOP and Christian nationalism and the things that are actual threats to queer rights and rights of people in general in the US. But it's when people ask oh, what do you think about Therian? I struggle not to be honest and just say that I don't really see what they're talking about. And it seems to me like a misuse of the word identify, or it seems like they're trying to use it like how trans people use the word identify, but that the actual meaning is different. So it's confusing where there's almost a bait and switch with the meaning there. But yeah, I also think you should absolutely be supporting your kiddo. And I don't think that being no, you're not a fucking cat is going to do anything to help your relationship with them or help them understand themselves. Like, definitely, I think being loving and supporting is the right approach. So, I don't know. That was kind of my verbal diarrhea, spraying these thoughts all over, because this isn't something that I spend a lot of time talking about. It's not super common. So, yeah, what do you think to all of that, Alex?
I think you just did exactly what I expected you to do, which was put my opinions into words that I haven't actually had someone to bounce this idea off of, really, other than my child, who a big part of this into it, other than the fact that you don't understand it, because I understand my child. I think a big part of her being a cat is tied to her being neurodivergent, 100%. It's very much a special interest. She, loves everything about cats and was obsessed with cats. And then this cat thing came. Actually, when she was younger, she was a fairy. She identified as, that word identify, I 100% agree with how it's not the right word, 100%. But when she was really, really young, whenever she would draw her little stick figure self, it was with fairy wings every single time. She has a picture of her dad and herself, and she always had these fairy wings year after year after year. And now she always has the cat ears and a cat tail. So it is very much a part of who she is, but I 100% agree that it's different. And I think the word identify, mislabels it to a lot of people who don't understand, and also maybe also are bigoted. And, I don't want to put the wrong idea in people's heads when she 100% is a cat and she has a hard time communicating. So her being able to express her emotions through hisses and meows, has actually really helped her communication when she started identifying as a cat. So it's really important to her, but it's also completely different than identifying as trans. It's not that, what you say, I can't remember your words, psychological, immutable sense of self or something like that.
I usually say a durable psychological state. But
yeah, that one.
Yeah. And I don't have any so for a little story, back in my hometown, my cousin's son is in middle school, and there is a student there who also identifies as a cat and likes to hiss and meow at people. And her son, my cousin's son, got in trouble for making fun of this kid. And she very proudly posted on some social media, I don't even remember, about how, her kid doesn't, lie to other kids and yada, yada, yada. And I had a discussion with her, and I still am upset with her because, regardless of what I think about Therian or cat gender or cat identifying as a cat, whatever you want to, call it, or if those are different things, there's no reason to bully anyone, especially for hissing. Hissing and meowing is the most harmless thing, and if it helps you communicate with your kid, awesome. I have no objection to that. And I know tons of furry people, and I think those little tails are cute, especially the little ones that are automated where they sway on their own. That's adorable. I probably would wear one of those if I was still a teenager. But yeah, I think it just gets confusing to me when people, and I guess this doesn't sound like it's your daughter that's doing this at all, but I think there are a lot of people and potentially bad actors who are intentionally trying to misrepresent experiences of people like your daughter, who try to suggest, just the sort of transracial conversation, that they're equivalent and that it demonstrates, the flaw in gender ideology, that, if you can identify as a cat, then you can identify as anything. I think, again, I totally think you're doing the right thing. Support your kid. It helps you communicate with her. It helps you understand her better. And it's something she's interested in. There's absolutely no reason to be you can't do that or whatever. But yeah, I think it's just frustrating to me when trying to have communication about concepts like identity and sort of these different definitions get conflated intentionally to dishonestly represent certain parts of the conversation. It just gets really frustrating. But I definitely don't think that, and I think this is probably a flaw on my part, that I have given too much credence to the people who are doing that being the Therian people, when in reality, the people who are probably doing the conflation the most are bad actor, anti-trans sort of people who are intentionally trying to conflate the two things for a negative anti-trans goal, when probably the actual Ethereum people are probably like, hey, like, that's not my fault. I just want to wear my cat tail and hiss at people. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, you know? So, Katie, do you have thoughts? I can see your...
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is why I just don't like the word identifies, because it just means loads of different things, doesn't it? Like, I wouldn't ever choose to say I identify as trans or I identify as a woman. I mean, like, you could say in one sense that I do literally do those things, because if someone says, what is your identity? Like, you know, eventually I would describe myself as a woman or a trans person. Not the first on the list, as we talked about with the previous caller, but some people seem to feel like when they say identifies as, they're making some ontological claim about their existence or the true nature of their soul or what their chromosomes are even, or something. It's just like, just a load of bullshit. Like, in it, not like what your kid feels or what trans people feel or anything, but this kind of whole like, oh, what if people really are kind of discussion. And like, you know, I have people all the time saying things like, oh, so you think that, you know, anyone should just be able to identify as a cat? Like, yeah, I think anyone should be able to identify as anything, because I don't want to control their thoughts, because I'm not like some kind of authoritarian dictator with a machine which can read people's minds and prevent them from seeing their identity in a certain way. Like, what do you think that means? Oh, I know someone who identifies as a fridge. Like, cool, all right, maybe that's how they see themselves. Literally doesn't affect me at all. It doesn't affect trans people at all. It doesn't affect your child who sees themselves as a cat at all. Like, what is important is looking at the individual aspects of what is going on. Like, when trans people, you know, some trans person might say, I identify as a woman. And when they're saying that, usually when trans people say that, they're trying to communicate that maybe they want to transition socially or medically. And we know that those things are beneficial for trans people. And when they, you know, they might be trying to communicate their pronouns to you, or they might be trying to explain how they see themselves. There's a lot of different things, but what you need to do is just find out the individual ways that we as a society and you as an individual need to help them or should not harm them. So like, if someone says, I identify as a woman, I'm like, well, what they're probably saying to me is, call me she, her, and don't refer to me as that man over there. Like, okay, cool. But if I was a doctor and someone came in and said that I identify as a woman, and I thought, this person I thought was a man when they first walked in, then maybe what they're trying to do is ask for healthcare. So in which case, now I need to ask the right questions about, are you trying to medically transition? Or maybe you're trying to medically detransition, and I need to find out and ask these individual things. Do you need laser hair removal? Do you need hormones? You know, that kind of thing. So when your child says, or maybe they don't say, maybe this is how you interpret it, that they identify as a cat, like, that doesn't mean that they're asking for cat hormones, like some fucking Republican knobhead might try and suggest. That doesn't mean that they need a litter tray in their school room. You know, how you've described it sounds like that's how they like to draw themselves, and it's how they like to communicate. And, you know, some children have atypical ways of communicating, and you'd be like, oh, well, you should force them to communicate like a normal person. It's like, that doesn't work for everyone. Sometimes there are people, and how their brain works is not like most people, and if you try and force them to act like everyone else, then they just have a real bad time, and they don't fit into society, they can't contribute to society, they can't live their lives. And as soon as you just let them be themselves, then they can do all of those things. And so if that means that, like, oh, you know, imagine you're at work and some new person comes in and they're like, you know, the person who hired them's like, oh, by the way, this person like hisses when they want you to give them space or something because they see themselves as a cat or something. Okay, who cares? Now I know. Yeah. Now I know that if this person makes a noise, that is what they're trying to communicate. It doesn't actually matter to me whether they see themselves as a cat or a fridge or a man or anything. All that matters is I know how to communicate with them. I'm not going to accidentally cause them distress, and I'm not their doctor. Like, so I don't know. That was a bit of a frustrated rant, and I hope it didn't come across as me being annoyed at you, Alex. But I think that this kind of identifies term has just been reactionaries are trying to use it as like, this person is delusional and they're trying to claim that they genuinely believe they have cat DNA. It's like, no, that isn't the claim being made here. When someone says, I identify as a cat, maybe there is someone who genuinely thinks they have cat DNA, and in which case they are factually wrong, and you could show them that, and if they still don't believe it, then they're probably delusional in some sense. But that isn't what people are saying, from my understanding. So, yeah. I hope that rant was understandable.
Yes, it was great. Like, thank you. Like I said, I haven't really fleshed this out with someone, and my daughter, although she is very verbal, like she does speak. Language is something that's difficult for her, and I want her to be able to communicate this correctly. And it is usually me that says. I mean, at home she says she's a cat all the time, but two people, like a therapist or someone or a new doctor, will say, "Oh yeah, by the way, she's a cat. That's why she's hissing." And it just like explains her behavior, and they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah," and they move on with their business, But thank you for everything. You've really helped flesh this out in my mind so that I can understand it better, and I understand it with language. And like I said, I don't usually say identify as. I normally just say she's a cat. Just like you would say, I'm a woman, or I'm a metalhead, or, that just describes who I am, or a part of who I am in the scenario that is relevant to you.
Yeah. And thank you for calling in about this, Alex, because I know sometimes the question will get pitched like, what do you think of theory and genders? And that question out of context will evoke a certain response from me versus like, do you think that I should disown my daughter and tell her that she's human in spite of what she's telling me about her identity, which is like a totally different question, right? And I think it's nice to give that full, rounded response so that people kind of know where we're coming from on those things and maybe don't read into what we're saying, maybe malice or like harshness towards people who identify as cats or something like that, where that doesn't exist. So thank you for calling in and helping us progress that conversation more. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you.
If in the future we got the technology to just like turn people into other animals, and someone was like, I identify as a frog and I have dysphoria and I need to be a frog, put them in the frog machine. Do not care. Like, they can have that. Like, maybe some other animal gets to communicate they want to be made into a human. How cool would that be? Then they could explain what it was like being an animal. Why do people care about this stuff? I mean, if it's your child, if it's someone you work with, if it's someone you know, if you're patient, it's good to be able to make people's lives better. But
yeah,
I just feel like people are looking for an excuse. They feel disgusted by trans people, and they watch far too much trans porn, and they want an excuse to feel justified in being angry. So they say, "Oh, a man who thinks he's a woman, that's the same as a kid who thinks it's a cat." And like, that's their little excuse in their mind to vote for people who want to ruin our lives and use the state to take away our freedom. And you're not looking for a real argument. You're just a fucking idiot who can't articulate the thoughts, couldn't make a real argument, and is acting on disgust alone.
Yeah.
If that's you, all in or fuck off, or both.
Also, I know if Dylan's in the chat and other people who followed my Twitter know, I've said on multiple occasions, like, those tails are fucking cool. And if I could just have a tail all the time, I would do it. I personally wouldn't say that I identify as a cat or anything, but I totally get the appeal of like, let me wear cat ears and a tail all the time. Cause like, it's adorable. And who doesn't want just like a fluffy tail all the time? That sounds like fun to me. But yeah. All right.
I would like to maybe do 7-2 just to see what this is about.
Sure.
If you're up for it.
We're going to take Emily in England. Pronouns are she, her. Emily, you are on the line. What's going on?
Hello.
Hi.
So,
Hi.
if I was to... Well, first, I should just say, because I was watching previous episodes, Katy, I'm also a big fan of Dream Theater, and I wanted to say that Octavarium's a better album.
I don't know about that, mate. It's a solid album.
No, but like the end song, Octavarium itself, is just peak.
Absolute masterpiece. Totally agree. Don't know if it's better than Changing Seasons, but it's so good. So, Emily, let's start this off. Let's carry this on as we've started it off. What is your question?
Yeah, okay. So I might ramble a bit, so feel free to interrupt me.
No problem.
I would say my question, a bit of context for my question is that I do identify as a woman, but I'm not really comfortable, like, coming out to anyone. Like, I am very happy existing on the internet as a woman and sort of presenting entirely female, but in real life, it just feels like incredibly wrong and panic-inducing when anyone uses correct quote-unquote pronouns for me. So, like, I think on a different episode, Katy, you mentioned you came out to your family and sort of felt like, oh no, this is real now, and you're wondering if it was a mistake. Well, I would say for me that feeling just never stopped, and eventually I just sort of stopped bringing the subject up. So eventually my parents just kind of forgot, and that's where I am in my life right now. It's not like it's not enjoyable for me because I hate getting misgendered and it hurts, but it felt like 10 times worse to actually be gendered correctly. So it's an awkward situation for me.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Emily. I mean, coming out is very surreal, and it's not just a big change, but you're also dealing with pressure from society and internal like conflicts with how you've been told you should be and stuff. And I guess my first question is, like, do you feel, and there's nothing wrong if you do, I mean, there's nothing morally wrong if you do, but, like, do you feel ashamed at the idea of being a trans person? Like, if everyone around you knew that you're a trans person, do you feel like, or do you feel like the idea of someone else being trans is a bit like, ugh? And if you do, I'm not judging you, because, like, I don't know, I have said it before, like, I definitely used to be transphobic. Like, I used to think trans people were all disgusting. Like, that's what stopped me from coming out. So you do feel that?
Well, no, I would say in terms of other people, no, I find it relatively easy because all the spaces I hang out in are essentially sort of trans adjacent, at least online. Yeah. So I don't really have a problem or like trouble with seeing other trans people as women, but for myself, absolutely, I do feel ashamed sometimes. It's more like I'm trying to mind read people and thinking, how do they see me?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I absolutely had this kind of discomfort. Shame is kind of the right word, but in another sense it isn't. And it's like I felt that it was wrong and bad. I mean, that's kind of the dumbest way to describe it, but it felt like it was bad of me to do this and it made me bad.
Yeah.
Or like it was a shameful thing, or like I should be ashamed of who I am. I should be embarrassed almost of wanting this. And
yeah, for me, it would be like, I think, non-existent if I passed, but that's sadly not an option. So I'm going to have to find a way around it.
Right. So, sorry, Arden, I keep cutting in.
No, it's okay.
I guess, how, like, because I find it much easier to, like, I think it's probably true for everyone to some extent. It's like, you know, can you follow your own advice? And it's kind of, can you give yourself the respect that you would give other people? I mean, it sounds like, you know, you would see me and Arden as women and maybe even would be upset on our behalf if some dickhead was saying otherwise. But then when it comes to yourself, when it comes to yourself, you can't feel that. And I noticed I was doing this, and how I felt like other trans people, particularly like other trans women who I most like felt the kinship with, deserved everything. You know, they deserve to have equal rights, and they deserve to be respected, and they deserve their families to love them. And then when it came to myself, I didn't feel like that at all. And so I noticed I was doing that, and I was like, you know, this is irrational. And this is a result of being brought up and being told my entire life that being trans is disgusting and bad and the butt of a joke, and, you know, the thing that everyone acts throwing up to in Jim Carrey or whatever. and that's why I feel like this. And so whenever I feel myself thinking I am bad, I am disgusting, or whatever, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve to be treated like a normal person, I just try to think of someone who I did respect, who at the time was kind of giving me the strength, like a prominent trans woman, and just being like trying to just imagine that instead I was saying that about them. Like, when next time you feel like, oh, I don't deserve to be called she, her, or I feel uncomfortable with this, or I should be ashamed or something, just imagine instead of you saying that about you, you were saying that about me, and you were saying it to my face. Like, could you say that to my face? Like, instead of being like, oh, Emily, you don't deserve this, be like, Katy, you don't deserve your family to treat you with respect. Because I find it so much easier to defend other people than myself. And I find it so much easier to respect other people and to accept who they are than I did for myself. I accept who I am now, but it was a struggle and it took a long time. And I think maybe it's the kind of person who I am, but I guess how I would deal with this is you've got to step back and be like, either, you just got to be realistic, or how I am is realistic. I don't want to like force this onto you, but either this is your life for the rest of your life, or you do something about it and change it. And you could, maybe you could exist like this, and maybe that's fine. And I don't want to say it's not. And maybe, sometimes coming out does make people's lives worse in the short term, sometimes indefinitely. But you've got to kind of be realistic and just say, is this what I want? And if not, then all of my feelings and stuff, I've just got to fight them. And I know it's possible to fight them because Katy's done it and Arden's done it and other people have done it. And, you do deserve to be happy in your life. And, I can't say anything about your life. Maybe you're not a trans person, maybe you are. But for me, I just feel like I felt this like this and it was horrible. And now I'm through it and life is just better. So, Arden, sorry, I really cut you off like 15 times.
No, that's all right. I'm curious, Emily, to what extent, and maybe I missed it, and if I did, I apologize, that you have like specific traumas relating to this sort of thing, because like go on.
Yeah, so I don't have any traumas as far as I know. Like, my life has been pretty great and sheltered, like very middle class, very normal, very boring. So yeah, I don't really see, because I haven't even been exposed to that much transphobic media in terms of what I've run into. So it's a constant thing where I'm like, I'm not sure where this came from. But also, can I just say to what Katy was saying, I would be happy to argue with myself in the case where I thought like I don't deserve this or something. But I would say it expresses itself more as a kind of just a non-verbal feeling of like everything is really wrong, and then it turns into a panic attack or something, which is like, it makes it a lot harder to function when I'm being gendered correctly.
Yeah.
Sure. And you can break that down though. Sorry, I'm not trying to just say you're wrong. But panic attacks are horrible and, they are genuinely overwhelming, and I've had them before. But I guess that's the kind of thing that you can deal with. It is possible to, even if you just do it as a practice, get it could be someone you know, or it could be some disposable person who you've talked to on the internet and you aren't really friends with. Just ask if they can just call you Emily and she, and maybe just call into this show every week and we can do it. And like, because then maybe it will get you past that idea, the sort of lizard brain emotional reaction to this. Because really, I just deal with everything by rationalizing it. And pronouns are made up bullshit. Like, you can be called anything, and it does mean things. Society means a lot by them, and they mean a lot to people. But we made it up. It's rubbish. So just keep telling yourself that someone's calling me she, but they could call me he, and they could call me they, and they could call me anything. It doesn't really matter, and that's kind of how I dealt with it.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction I was going to take things with asking about personal trauma. And it's okay if you don't have the personal trauma. I think just growing up in a cis normative society can be trauma enough for some people with regard to those value beliefs about, trans people or ourselves as trans people. Because I relate deeply to what you're talking about with the when people started gendering me correctly early in transition, that almost made me feel worse and less safe than being misgendered. And in part, I think that's because in a lot of instances, being gendered correctly, especially early in transition, can quite literally put your safety more at risk. If somebody who looks like a boy is getting called she by their friends or their parents in public, that, is going to spark curiosity. But the thing that really helped me with regard to all of this, and if it's not useful to you, you can tell me that was worthless or whatever. But was kind of like, I because of trauma that I had a lot of negative value judgments about myself as a trans person. Trans people are freaks or whatever, or unlovable or all of those things. And at a certain point, what really helped me was just adopting that, was being like, maybe trans people are freaks, but even if I am a freak, it doesn't mean I can't go to the grocery store as myself. It doesn't mean I shouldn't be allowed to occupy space or eat at a restaurant as myself, and, just kind of be like, maybe I'm a freak. And if you think that, you're entitled to think that, but it doesn't mean that I'm any less deserving of, existing in society. And I just kind of want to eat this food. And if you're going to have a problem with me over that, that sounds like more of you. Over time, it kind of gets refined into being confident as yourself and kind of viewing people's judgments at you as the problem, which is really what it is. But yeah, sorry, you wanted to respond to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I do agree in principle. Sorry, I can hear myself. I don't know if I'm echoing. Anyway, yeah. I agree in principle, and to strangers, that's completely fine. I won't feel good about them if they think I'm a freak or something, but I could cope with that. But when it's a family member or my extended family, and it feels like there's a point of no return. Once they know, yep. And then their view of me is permanently altered. That's what I'm really not getting past.
Yeah, it's definitely worse with family, and I also found it was worse at home, like my parents' house. I mean, I don't know your living situation, but even when my parents came to visit, that felt awkward. I in front of my new friends, I didn't even really think about it anymore, and then suddenly in front of my parents I was really self-conscious and I felt ashamed and stuff.
Exactly.
But then it was even worse going home for Christmas, and it was I'm surrounded by the street I grew up in and the house that smells like when I was a 10-year-old, and that all added to it. And I think that that's emotional discomfort from. It's really hard to explain and to kind of compartmentalize and break down into pieces.
I do get completely what you mean.
But I think what I can say is that I am definitely past that. I actually saw my family today, earlier today, and they treat me like their daughter and a normal person, and we're closer than ever, and I don't get those feelings at all. But I had that feeling, certainly when I went home for Christmas and something, lasted quite a long time, and it was some level of uncomfortable. And I just had to be I know this is a result of how I was brought up, not by my parents specifically, they weren't parents or openly homophobic or transphobic or anything, but the way society has just drilled into you that the idea of being trans is shameful to your parents and they might not love you. Once I realized that they did love me, still, I was just able to just tell myself that and to fight through the feeling, and the feeling just gets replaced. I mean, time does heal emotions, in my experience. But other than telling you what has happened to me and hopefully describing something very similar to what you have and saying that I got over it, I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm being too much slapping you and be snap out of it, because that's not at all what I'm trying to do. And I know that it really can be traumatic and difficult. But at the same time, I think rationalizing and being realistic and stepping back and looking at the situation and imagine you're giving advice to a friend who is you. Imagine you're not you anymore, and you're just telling someone else who has taken over you what to do, and then just coming back and following that advice. I think you know what you would tell a friend who is in the same position as you, and what you would want for them, and that should be what you tell yourself and what you should want for you. And when you feel yourself not doing that, you should just be like, no, you're an irrational idiot who's following society's transphobic rules. Like, snap out of it. And yeah, I know it's not that easy, but I don't know.
I mean,
do you feel like? Sorry, go on.
Sorry. Okay. It does help hearing the other people have had the same experience and got through it. That is reassuring to me.
Definitely.
Good.
Lots of people have shared almost identical to what you're going through and worked through it. So there's definitely
and the reason
hope for you.
The reason I'm coming at it from this angle is when I was in this kind of zone, feeling terrified and uncomfortable and worrying about my family and all this other kind of stuff, I was reaching out to lots of trans people on mainly on Twitter, and being like, how did you feel this? And lots of people were really nice, and that is great because lots of people are nice. Trans people are generally really nice, and they're like, oh, I hope you get through this, and I had something similar and stuff. And then one time I messaged this lady, and she was like really tired and had just got back from work or something, and she was like, look, no offense, mate, but you've got to fucking sort your life out. Either you're going to be moping around for the rest of your life, or you're going to transition and be happy. So sort it out, and the quicker you sort it out, the less of your life you'll waste. And that was a bit too harsh, and it made me a bit uncomfortable and made me panic a little bit. But in the end, I did keep thinking about that, because I really think you need to go at your own pace when you transition, but it's so easy to stagnate and get stuck. And if you do, it's okay. Take your time. But once you realize you're caught in a loop, you need to step back and be like, right, come on, let's fucking sort this out. Either I am happy here or I need to change something. And that doesn't necessarily mean transition, doesn't necessarily mean come out. Maybe it means detransition, maybe it means whatever. But if you're not happy, you do have to change something. Or seek help from people.
Yeah.
I think. As a non-qualified, non-professional.
I think we're going to have to wrap up this call, Emily, because we do still have other callers we would like to get to. But hopefully that was helpful. And if it's not, or if you have other thoughts, or, in like a week's time and you want to call back, we definitely invite you to do that.
Sure,
yeah,
thank you very much.
If you want to talk more about it in DMs on Twitter, you're welcome to DM me about it and stuff. I really feel for your position, because I feel like I was exactly where you were at one point, but I managed to. I don't know. I'm just the kind of person who finds it easy to kind of slap myself in the face, and I don't really want to project that onto other people. So if you don't find that useful, please don't DM me, because I'll do more of that. But if you do find that useful, I'm happy to talk.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Have a nice night, Emily. Thanks
Emily.
for calling.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. So we have 4 calls on the line. I've closed the lines for now, because we normally don't have this much call volume towards the end of the show. I'm thinking 16-1. Yep.
Still.
All right. Also, I do have to run to the bathroom, so I'm gonna get you started on this call, and then I'm gonna one-up you for a little bit. All right, let's bring on Igor. Pronouns are he, him in Serbia. Igor. Oh, it's not bringing. Hold on.
Should I do it?
There we go. All right, Igor, you are live now. Welcome to the show. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh. Okay. I want to say I'm new to all of this. I wasn't watching the show. I was considering it boring until recently, when I saw Leah Thomas' story, and then I got interested in trans issues. What I want to ask is, I heard that there is research about gender and sex, that they can be different, but I was watching YouTube for several days now. I didn't find any research. I only found that it exists. So I wanted to ask, where can I find something to educate myself?
So, I guess when people say gender can be different from sex, often what they're talking about is trans people like Leah Thomas and also like me and Arden who are doing this show and some of the other hosts or all of the other hosts on this show. I might argue about what all of these words mean, but it sounds to me like you want a kind of basic understanding, a starting point. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I was taught in school that there are only two genders. I mean, and now I hear that there are 31 genders in New York State. I mean, it sounds ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. So, I guess, well, a good place to start if you want to learn about it from the like medical perspective would be to just look up and see what some major medical organizations are saying. I don't know what the main medical organization in Serbia is called or what their position is, but I can say that if you look up any of the American or the British or Canadian medical organizations or the Australian one, basically any of the English-speaking ones. So if you look at the NHS or the APA or the WHO, and just see what they have. Like they have pages on their websites. If you were to type in something like NHS transgender or APA transgender or something, it would give you some basic overview and would have some links on the page to at least get you started with some of the terms. But I guess to your point of like you used to think there was two genders and suddenly you're told that there's like 31 or whatever. When people say that, I guess what they're saying is in a lot of the world, people fall very neatly into one of two boxes. And a lot of the time, you know, everywhere in the world, people fall neatly into one of two boxes. And they're either a man or they're a woman. And men do men things and women do women things. And that's just how it's always been and how it always will be. And some people just say, well, I don't really feel like that's true. And I don't feel like it fits me. And I don't want to do this stuff. And I don't see myself this way. And I want to physically change my body. And I guess to my main reaction to that is, I mean, obviously I am a trans person, but I also would describe myself as a woman. And if someone tells me they're non-binary or they're 31 gender or whatever, you know, they're a different gender, I don't necessarily understand why they would want to do that. I don't understand why someone would be non-binary, but I don't really understand why someone would be a man either. I just think where I am is the best place to be. And so I don't really care. Like, I get it's interesting. And then maybe you seem like, wow, okay, this is pretty crazy. You know, as in like, this is new to me. But I guess we can look and say, in lots of different societies throughout all of history, there have been examples of people who describe themselves as not a man and not a woman, and they try and describe themselves in different ways. And there's something there. I mean, there is lots of medical research which will shows the existence of something we could call gender identity, which you can read up on. But a good kind of a feeling for it, an overview, is you know, these people who are in some way different have always existed in some form. And you know, I wouldn't necessarily say there was 31 genders because I wouldn't really want to put a number on it, and it's kind of subjective and open to interpretation. But you know, some people might describe it like that. But I don't know, Igor, what do you have any questions about what I've said, or what do you think?
I don't know. Just is there something else except someone saying I am a woman, I am a man? Is it all just what somebody says?
So that can be part of it. So you know, how we refer to men and women is different in most languages on earth. So obviously we have the words man and women, but in English we also have he and she and his and hers and Mr. and Mrs. and stuff like that. But we also in English at least, and in some other languages, have an option of like a neutral one. So we like have they, them, and we have it, and other terms to refer to those. And that is, that is part of it. If someone says, "Can you refer to me differently instead of calling me she, her? Can you call me they, them?" That is part of it. But also, there are people who don't see themselves as men and who don't see themselves as women at the same time, who want to physically change their body. So, like me and Arden have both done a medical transition. And that means changing hormones, and it can involve, for some people, surgeries, and it can involve, lots of different things. And that's true for trans women like us, but it's also true for some non-binary people who might not want to go, if they were born a boy, they might not want to transition the same amount.
I guess what I want to ask is there
it.
something biological about gender?
So, if I can jump in. Hey, Igor, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm back
of
now.
course you can.
So I would say, yeah, there is something biological about gender, in that gender is clearly a psychological construct to some extent, right? I mean, you can't have a concept of a gender without having some sort of psychological awareness of your gender. And much like handedness and personality, it's not clearly defined. But the problem is, a lot of people will appeal to, oh, is there something biological you can point to, the way you can point to, if somebody gets a blood test, you can diagnose diabetes, right? Nothing like that exists for gender. But to be fair, nothing like that exists for a lot of conditions that are uncontroversial and not commonly disputed in the media. So trans people and gender identity often gets, in my opinion, unfairly scrutinized with this. Well, is there something biological, though, something material you can point to demonstrate your gender? And not exactly. We don't have that technology yet, but I'm not sure that really matters, because if we're going to actually apply that standard evenly, so much of psychology and our understanding of how people develop is going to unwind at that point. So, I mean, I don't think that there's really anything meaningful to draw from. If you're asking, is there anything biological, and I say no, it's not like there's a logical consequence you can follow from that. Therefore, trans identity is made up. Like, that's just, it doesn't follow from that.
I see. Okay, I have one more question.
Okay.
Have you heard of Helen Joyce, and what do you think about her book?
Oh, you're muted, Katy.
I have heard of Helen Joyce, and I haven't read her book yet. I do plan to read all of the gender critical books, but I've got hobbies.
I didn't either, but I searching around. How do you say? I found her, and I was listening to her. So
Helen Joyce is. I think Helen Joyce is a really vile, hateful person. I also think she's pathetic. I have to be a little careful of how I describe her, because she has threatened to sue people who have disagreed with her and who have described her in a way that she doesn't like. Helen Joyce she went on a podcast and she said that she believes we as a society need to reduce the number of trans people. That's a quote. And she said that she thinks trans people are a huge problem to a sane world. She's part of a group which is advocating to remove basically all rights that trans people have in the UK. They want to be able to ban people like me from women's toilets at work. They want to be able to make it so trans healthcare is unaccessible for most people. They want to make it so it's legal to discriminate against trans people. And in her book, where she interviewed... in the research for her book, I need to be very careful about this again. In the research phase of her book, she interviewed someone who believes that the Jews invented trans ideology. But I don't think she interviewed any trans people. She's written about us without knowing anything about us. She's made it her entire life to just make up bullshit about us. And the things that she believes are just trivially false. I have very strong opinions on her, and I've been very light-handed in my description of her. If you want to read a book about trans people, I suggest reading one written by a trans person in the same way that if you wanted to learn about women, you wouldn't read a book by men.
Okay. Anyway, that's all for now. Maybe I'll call some other week.
Please do.
You have other callers.
Yes.
You have a good night.
Thanks, Igor.
Thanks, Igor. Thanks for the call.
Have a wonderful night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, we've got 2 callers left on the line. I know you're
we doing it
ahead of me in time. I'm good to just take them all if you're good to take them all.
Trucking. I think we can take them all.
The lines are closed, so no new callers will come in.
I've been awake since 5 a.m. because my boiler stopped working at 5 a.m. and it was -6 degrees, which is apparently 21 American units. And
well, if you think 0 in Celsius is 32 in Fahrenheit, so you can kind of like, gauge it from there. But anyway, all right, let's. So if we're just gonna take them in order, I'm gonna take them in the order they came in. So Philip has been on the line for an hour and almost 2 hours. I am so sorry, Philip, that you would ever wait this long to talk to us. Philip, he, him in Austria. What do you want to talk about today?
Yes, hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm sort of into filmmaking. I'm not really a professional, and I'm trying to write a book right now about film theory and so on. And I wanted to ask, are there any do's or don'ts that you could or should or shouldn't do if you're tackling like the so-called trans issue in cinema? Because in film there are obviously other rules than in real life according to ethics and so on. You can use the N-word maybe in a movie about slavery and so on to be historically accurate. You have to work with narratives to a certain extent. You have to put certain issues and simplify them maybe in a poetic way. And so I just wanted to talk about this so that I don't write any bullshit into my book or film any bullshit into film project.
I have thoughts.
Me too. You go for it.
My first thoughts are, I know some trans people would say, don't have anyone play a character who is trans without them being trans. And for the most part, I would agree with that. Like, I definitely prefer to see trans actors play trans characters. However, I think what's more important to me than a trans actor playing a trans character is having trans writers in the room if you're going to talk about trans issues. Because so often, I think there are actors who seem like they could do a phenomenal job with the character, even if they're cis. And I would like the show, but the movie, but the problem is that the writing doesn't represent the trans experience at all. And it's very clear that somebody who knew trans people was writing about trans people, and there was no trans people contributing to that script.
Or somebody who doesn't know about trans people is writing it.
Right. And so, a big thing for me, it would be having trans people in the writer's room, like working closely to capture certain experiences. Because I think there is, like you're talking about, if you were going to talk about the historical impacts of like, back in before the Stonewall riots or something, right? When a lot of trans women were calling themselves queens, or, a lot of people have repurposed slurs and people still do that today. I think you could use those terms, but if there wasn't a queer person and specifically a trans person there to inform like how to do that well, a great example of a show that I think kind of addresses this is Pose. One of the lead directors for Pose is Janet Mock. She's written 2 autobiographies. They're both phenomenal. I love her work. I think her representation of the trans experience, back in the early days of queer advocacy and the gay liberation front is so phenomenal. I mean, obviously it's still a drama. So there's always stuff that is kind of not, really informing a historical perspective. But I think she handles things phenomenally. And because she's a trans person who's the director in that situation. But those are kind of my initial thoughts. Katie, what do you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to be more specific. Do not have a scene where, in order to communicate that they're trans, you basically have a cis man putting on makeup in the mirror. Absolutely fucking hate that. Like, whenever someone wants to write about trans people, a positive article, they have an over-the-shoulder shot of someone putting on makeup. And it's just the most bullshit, insulting, incorrect stereotype that being trans is just about makeup, which is just a load of rubbish. and don't have a scene where they discover that they are trans by, for some reason, being forced to put on a dress. Like, so I don't know if you've seen the film The Danish Girl, which is a vaguely true story about a trans person from the 30s. And in that, like, the lady who is at the time presenting as a man, has to, for some reason, model a woman's dress or something to be painted. And it's just like, and there's this like awakening scene where they realize their true like calling in life is to wear a dress, and it's just bullshit. Yeah, and I guess the other thing is, or maybe this is maybe a little contradictory, but I wouldn't want trans people to be treated with like kids' gloves. Like, I don't know if that's the right term. Like, to be, you have to, be really respectful and tread on eggshells. But at the same time, there's this kind of trope in LGBT cinema stuff. It's like, they always just die. Like, you don't need to write your like, you can have someone spit the slur at this trans person in the street, but they don't have to die. They don't have to be heartbroken. They don't have to have their life torn apart at the end of the story. Like, they could just be a character in a film who's just there, and then maybe it comes up that they're trans, and maybe there's a joke there, or maybe there's a part of the story that's integral to the plot, but they don't then have to have a disaster ending. And I'm only saying that because a lot of people seem to think that they need to have a disaster ending. I know one of my lesbian friends was saying that she was trying to find a lesbian film where no one dies, and it's actually really difficult because the majority of them, someone seems to die in them. I guess they're my like specific trope avoidance things. And also, just to what Arden says, I know some cis actors can play trans people, but the issue is, in today's world where a lot of people want to try and portray trans women as just a man in a dress in order to justify taking away rights we need to live. If you literally just have a man in a dress in order to communicate a trans person, like Arden says, that you could do it, someone who's early in transition, and maybe they are the best person for the role, and blah, blah, blah. But like, it's so easy for that to be garbage. And maybe if you can if there are plenty of trans actors. There are enough of them. But if you were just doing it with your mates because you're on a low budget or something, maybe just get a cis woman to play instead, so you don't have the risk. I don't know what you.
Sorry.
I thought of another one.
We've talked enough. I want Philip to be able to. Was that helpful?
I thought one more. Another classic is that the trans woman like does something laddish to show who she really is, like burps with all the guys or something, or likes football, or just like people are complex. Like, men and women like different things. Some women like football, some men don't. Like, it's just you don't need a trope like, she's really a bloke. Like, just so cringe. Anyway, Philip, sorry, I've done a long rant. What do you think?
Yes, thank you very much. This was very helpful, I think. I can work with this. And also, because we are talking about budget and so on, I worked on my first feature when I was like 12 or something, and no girls would really want to hang out with me, and I shot this movie with like my phone and so on. And so I had to play all the female parts in like a dress by my mom and so on. I hope this is not offensive, but I did it because of the budget reasons, and then I just said that, okay, because the interesting thing to me always was, because if film characters are not really, they don't have to have a gender or a sex, because they are not fully fleshed out human beings. They're just characters in my fantasy. So it doesn't really matter to an extent to me, I think. What do you think about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Okay,
I mean, you don't need to...
One other thing, because
Go for it.
Sorry, I just wanted to give you a quick tip to this caller who talked about her child identifying quote unquote as a cat, it reminded me a lot about a text by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari that they wrote in Thousand Plateaus, and they are talking about becoming animal and so on. And it was pretty much that concept, I think, that she described. So I would recommend this book and the chapters or plateaus about becoming animal. So I think this might be helpful. So I don't know. I think you have a few other callers, so I have nothing more to say. Thank you very much. I don't know.
Thanks, Philip. I appreciate it. Good luck with your all your cinema stuff. And call us back if you're like, man, I wrote a book and people were so mad your advice was shit. Dude, call us and tell us. We'd like to know.
Yeah, we'll cancel you.
Okay. Yes, sure. I will send you a copy if it gets translated into English someday.
I would love that. Thank you, Philip. Have a nice day.
Bye. Right. Let's
somebody also, real quick before we take this last caller, somebody pointed out a great way to have a cis actor play a trans role. And Laverne Cox did this in Orange is the New Black, and it was brilliant. If a trans person has a cis sibling or a cis twin, because I'm pretty sure Laverne Cox sibling who played...
Yeah, they're identical twins, I think.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was a really great point, in a way that it was done very effectively. All right, last caller of the day. Bobcat in New York wants to know if his sister has more rights than trans people. Bobcat, what do you mean by that? Get into it.
Well, I mean, I live in the United States, and I'm one of 10 children. My sister is gay. She's been gay, or she's known about it, at least since the early 1980s. I'm 58. She's 62, I think. I was wondering, legally speaking, within the United States, I can't really speak on Great Britain or anything like that. Within the United States, I think my sister, as a gay person, has more legal rights than trans people, because nobody's really passing laws against my sister for being gay, but there's a whole host of laws being passed or about to be passed to restrict trans people in some fashion. My sister did join the Army during the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, so she had to keep it to herself for 8 years. When she got out and she told them she was gay, they didn't punish her or anything. But I guess that's kind of my point. Since the 80s, and since the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage, it seems to me that people are attacking gay people less and attacking trans people more, legally speaking.
Yeah. So, to answer your question, excuse me, about what rights she does or doesn't have, I would agree with you that by and large, gay people aren't attacked nearly as much as trans people are nowadays. However, last year, there was I believe it was a Supreme Court ruling that in certain instances, businesses can discriminate against even gay people for services rendered that might violate their conscience or their religious values or something like that. So I don't think I've actually seen any cases since that was settled that have come up to be like, oh, I was discriminated in this case because of that ruling, but I'm sure it's happened. So I wouldn't say gay people are out of the woods by any stretch. I think
no, that's not what I was trying. I wasn't trying to say that gay people don't have problems.
No.
Obviously, there's still targets in a lot of ways, but if you pick any southern U.S. state, if they're trying to pass an anti-trans law, say against kids transitioning or taking away the parents' rights to transition or help their kids transition, that's not really happening to gay people.
No, I agree. The reason I brought up the law that I did was just because I think it would be remiss to say something along the lines of like, well, gay people aren't really attacked anymore, and it's all the focus is on trans people. I think the majority of it is, but there are definitely still laws that specifically target LGBT people at large.
If you're like asking, are trans people more discriminated against in order to get an understanding of where we are in terms of trans rights. I would say, yeah, at the moment, trans people are getting a lot more flack. But if you're asking, I guess the other way to interpret this question is like, who has it worse, gay people or trans people? I'm not saying that's how you're asking it, but I do think that often, I don't think it's really helpful. I don't like creating a hierarchy of rights, because you sometimes end up with this thing where someone's like, trans people are the group that has it the worst in all of society, and then some other people are like, yeah, but you're a white person saying that, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then someone else is like, well, disabled people don't have anything, and then it gets this argument between who has it the worst. And the thing is, we are hopefully, I mean, we're all in this together regardless of what we want, but hopefully we can unite and say, society discriminating against people based on their race is fucking garbage, and also discriminated on them based on whether they're disabled is garbage. And hey, look, the patterns of how they do discrimination look the same every time. So when we spot them, we can work together to fight them. And it also applies to gay people, and it also applies to trans people. And the reason that LGBT people kind of get lumped together is because the ways in which they attack us and the ways they treat us is so the same. Like, they often use the word for the word same arguments. It's often from the same people. They give the same reasoning. And gay people are their new trans people are their new target. And like, in some cases, like the most obvious example was in Australia. They had this family equality bullshit organization. I can't remember what they were called, like family equality or something. And the day after the Australia passed the gay marriage law, they changed their name to like Binary Australia and flipped to attacking trans rights. And they did that because they could just use all the same contacts, all the same resources, all the same funding, all of the same arguments, but it's the new line in the sand. And so, you know, we could say, oh, trans people are getting it worse, but I think it's best to look at, this is a battle from, you know, you could say a battle from patriarchy, or it's a battle from people who want this like conservative family values stuff to force it on everyone and to control how they live their lives. And they are the same people generally who want to stop women having access to abortion, and also generally don't want gay people to get married, and generally want to stop trans people from having healthcare. So,
I never meant to say there weren't people who are bigots against gay people. Obviously, there are. But using my father raised 10 kids alone after my mother died. And my father, I think he's deceased now, but he accepted my gay sister as gay. I'm not sure he would have done that if somebody in the family, in my 10 brothers and sisters, was trans. He might not have been so open to that. In the example of my sister, my father had a choice: either accept my daughter or my sister as gay, or lose a daughter. He chose not to lose a daughter. Now, if I was a trans person and I told him that, knowing my father pretty well, he would have thrown me out of the house.
I mean, maybe, but also people are complicated and capable of learning, and you know, people do throw their LGBT kids out, and people throw their gay kids out even today, all the time. But also sometimes you get surprises where someone who you think either you get a surprise and they're accepting immediately, or sometimes it just takes work. And like, you know, lots of people, their parents do say, I don't accept this, and then 3 years later they come around to it because they realize, like you say, they either accept their kid or they don't have a kid. So, and I think that's an easy choice for any good parent.
The ironic thing is that when my father got older, he chose my sister, the one who's gay, as executor of his will, the person who took care of him the most. He was deeply, deeply connected to her towards the end of his life, and she's not even the oldest in the 10 children. She's in the younger 4, like I am, and he chose her to be the executor of the will when he passed away, take care of him when he got older, and so I'm not sure he would have done that with a trans daughter or son.
You won't ever know. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting to speculate and stuff sometimes. I will say, in my experience, even generally conservative people will often, when a person of their family comes out as gay or trans, will all of a sudden be like, well, I'm still not going to vote for your rights, but I like you and you aren't all those bad things
you're
that
one
I'm
of the
told
good
trans
ones.
people are. So you must be cool. You're the exception. You're one of the good ones or whatever. But yeah, you know, you'll never know. There is a lot of parents who would accept a gay kid and throw out a trans kid. But I think most of the time, if you're going to disown your child for being trans, you probably wouldn't accept them for being gay. I think they're pretty aligned on where people, you know, will take action against that. But
I also think it's worth remembering that people. Sorry, Bobcat. I think it's also worth remembering, like, without it sounding like I'm making excuses for bigotry, people are a product of their time, and when gay people were first coming to the front of culture and people knowing what they were, and you know they were starting to be in films and all this kind of stuff, was probably when your dad was still in his period of learning about society and feeling like he is part of it and controlling it and stuff. And so he had the chance to introspect and accept gay people. Trans people have only just done that, you know, in the last decade, and that's why suddenly we're the conversation. Where and people who are his age when he first found out about your sister now will probably have the same reaction as he does to a trans person. So, you know, so I sometimes think maybe my grandparents wouldn't have accepted me, but then at the same time, if they were alive now, then they would probably be younger, and in which case they would be in a different phase of their life. Like it's too. I could just never know. I could just never know. So
the only thing I'm going to say about my father is we were raised Catholic, but he didn't really give two shits about the church. He didn't go to church. He stopped making me go to church when I went through my confirmation. He was not in any way a religious conservative by any stretch. He was very uncomfortable with the religious right, and I don't think any prejudice that he had, and he had some, came from any kind of religious conservatism. He was not real happy with Ronald Reagan or the moral majority or Jerry Falwell or the people of his time that were the religious right.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I even relate to a certain extent. My dad is very, very conservative, but my dad himself is not religious at all. But like, no, I don't think he would call himself an atheist, but he definitely doesn't believe in anything.
I am an atheist.
But at the same time, I think it's a hard line to draw when you're like, oh, he wasn't religious, so I don't think his conservatism was informed by that. But I would contend that similarly, I mean, maybe your dad's totally different. I don't know. But coming from a similar perspective with my father, I find that his values still all align almost identically with the conservative religious people on those social issues. So it's kind of like, I think it's hard to separate that because, at least in America, the religion has informed so much of the conservative party's values that it's pretty hard to identify as a conservative and then say, oh, but my views on social issues aren't informed by religion. Like, if you're a conservative, they definitely are. I don't think you can extract those things from each other. But I would be interested in hearing someone make a case for why that can be, because I'm not super convinced that it could be.
My father, like I said, this is going back ways. He supported Jimmy Carter in the election versus Ronald Reagan, and there was a world of difference between those two. The fact that my father was angry that Ronald Reagan won, I don't know if I would describe my father as a political conservative or a religious conservative or any kind of conservative in any major way. I just don't see that. I mean, obviously, it's my father that I'm talking about, not yours.
Sure.
But I guess that's all I wanted to say. I was just curious about your opinion.
Yeah, thanks for calling in, Bobcat. It's definitely an interesting conversation. I think sometimes people forget that just because trans people are the political football, that, you know, gay people are out of the woods. They're good now. And it's like, I wouldn't go that far. So it is an interesting conversation. Right. Thanks for bringing it up.
Okay, thank you.
Have a nice night, Bobcat. Talk to you later.
Bye.
All Alrighty. And that wraps the caller portion of the show. Thank you so much to everybody who called in. We had great callers today. I feel like not everyone was like on our side or asking for advice, but everyone was willing to have like a productive and honest conversation, which is literally all I ever ask for.
I tweeted out asking people to call in and justify that stuff I said at the start, that there were only 3 colors or whatever, that they have a binary definition of sex. Got loads of replies on the tweet. I was tweeting at them during the show, call in. None of them did, because they're all pathetic, because they know they can't do this. If just imagine you believed a thing and you had evidence for it, you would want to call in a show and embarrass these people. Like, wouldn't you? I mean, imagine if there was this show of like these 2 fucking nerds doing a thing where they're like, the moon isn't real. Someone call in with some evidence to prove me that the moon's real. You'd be like, I got a photo of the moon. I can see it from my window right now. I can, like, you can look up with the telescope and see where we've landed on it. Like, this is going to be amazing. I can dunk on these flipping idiots. Where's people? Like, how easy would it be to call in and just be like, the binary definition of sex is...
Yeah, I've actually, so I think we've talked about it before. Colin Wright on one episode of the Hang Up that I was on jumped in the chat and said something that was just a complete straw man of what Matt and I were saying. And my response was, if the first thing you do is come into the side chat and be dishonest, I'm just going to ban you, because I know what your game is and it's not worth anyone's time. I don't need to address the top dog to... Not that he's a top dog, but you know what I'm saying. To address the arguments. But the thing is... But, wait, let me finish my point, though. Okay. But then he went on to Twitter and posted a screenshot and said, oh, I just went into their chat saying this totally different thing that's not at all what he said, and they told me I wasn't welcome here. And that's the problem with, these big gender critical accounts, and why I don't think we're going to get nearly any of them calling in part because I don't tolerate bullshit, and I will always interrupt you when you say an untrue thing to make sure that is clear. But yeah, even the ones who have tried to interact with our shows could not represent the situation honestly and are so compelled to stick to their bullshit narrative that it just had to be misrepresentation all the way down. But anyway, sorry. You were going to jump in on him?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the cringy thing is, he is one of their top dogs. Like, yeah, he's one of their standard bearers for this binary sex bullshit. And what's so incredible is, he's written this article where he genuinely says, sex is binary, like flipping a coin is binary. And then says, oh, but obviously it can land on the edge, but that doesn't really count. Like, actually does that. Like, he makes, not only does he make the binary analogy of a coin flip, which if you said to someone, think of a binary like a coin, most people would just accept that. And only the, like, nerds like me would be like, actually, it's got 3 sides or more. But most people just, it accepts as a binary. He specifically brings up that it isn't binary. His own analogy, he's the nerd who goes, well, actually. And then he's just like, oh, yeah, exceptions don't count. Because he has no answer for it. I can't believe that he committed this to paper and was like, this is what best represents my position of binary sex, an analogy which has 3 states. Don't think about the exceptions. Like, just perfect. It's just the same as flipping Dr. Emma Hilton saying there's only 2 colors in a color gradient. It's just like, they're so incredibly trapped in their wrong. Like, it's wrong. So they can never give a convincing argument. They can never say something that's just true about it, because if they did, then their whole argument would fall down.
Right.
Just amazing. Like, also, in fact, you should go and read that article, because it is...
We're going to move on to super chats. So super chats are $5 or more. We can read out live, whatever you want to send. But I do want to respond. Somebody said, so no more Pine Creek Doug. Pine Creek Doug is welcome to call in. But if he wants me to be nice to him while he continues to... Like, we were talking about, so you're not actually discriminating on fairness. You're just discriminating against trans people. And he says, yes. If he wants me to be nice to him and handhold him through that, that's not going to happen. You're welcome to call in if you are a gender critical, anti-trans sort of person. But if you think that I'm going to... This is what I've been saying about the show since the beginning. And this is part of the reason why we started the show. In every space where these people are allowed to talk, and we hear both sides. They're able to say those things, and it's expected that the socially polite thing to do is to let them get their whole argument out. But here on this show, I am going to make sure when I'm on air, if you say an untrue thing, sometimes I'll let you finish your point if I think you're trying to be honest and maybe you just have bad information. But if you are being a dishonest asshole, like Doug was, I'm going to jump in. And if you can't handle the fact that I'm not going to let you lie on my show, that's not my problem. So yeah,
if you come in with if you're like, obviously frogs have 6 legs and therefore, and you're like, wait, I don't need to hear your therefore. Let's talk about that thing where you said frogs all have 6 legs, because
right.
If your argument is based upon that, then it's wrong. We don't need to go any further.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to super chats. We could keep Katie here another couple hours, but you want me to? You take this first one since it's addressing you.
Okay. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. Katie, what are we going to do about your prime minister? I know my governor in Texas needs to go, but your PM and his government are more vulnerable. Yeah, the current government we have is just totally fucked. They are, I mean, I don't like to say anything certain in politics, but they have such a low approval rating. Apparently today, sorry if this doesn't mean anything to people, but you might have heard we had a prime minister who was a lady called Liz Truss for 11 days or something, or however long it was. She just appeared and then disappeared after she destroyed the economy in 1 week. When she was in that situation, had a higher approval rating than our current guy does, which is just incredible. The election's going to be this year. Yeah, it's I don't know. The issue is not the Conservatives anymore. They've run out of time. There's very little they can do. They've gone all in on this Rwanda thing. Maybe that'll happen, and it's really fucking grim. We should protest against that. But from a trans perspective, from focusing on trans rights, I mean, obviously from a trans perspective, you should care about the horrible bullshit the immigrants facing too. But from a trans rights perspective, we just need to think about the Labour Party, who are going to probably be in power, and they're going to be bad for trans rights too. So, not as bad. Anyway, call in.
Yeah. We've got 120 check stacks from Naresh. Hello, Katy and Arden. Thank you. Thank you so much, Naresh.
Well, was that another British in the room?
Convincing, I know.
$5 from Melissa. In my opinion, everything related to equality after the 14th Amendment is redundant and only needed because some dipshits need to be told, no, X isn't equal.
Right.
I don't know what
so
the 14th Amendment is.
The 14th Amendment is basically the non-discrimination part of the Constitution, which is there should be no discrimination on the basis of race, gender, age, sex, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure there will be things that ways we'll divide humans in the future that won't be explicitly covered that we ought to consider. So I'm sure there will be, I get what you're saying. It should just be, don't discriminate against people over things over which they have no control. Would probably be a better way to sum up that entire group.
Being a bell end though.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is nice to have explicit things, that way nobody can be like, but I interpret this a different way. Anyway, thank you, Alyssa.
Oh, she.
Oh, right, sorry. I talked the most on the last one, so I assumed that you read it. 20 pounds up from Jackie Greenland. Hosting an event, so can't watch live again tonight. I would have been torn, having been #Team Arden for so many weeks, but my home team, #Team Katy, is back. Bugger, did I just sit on the fence? You did, but we'll let it go because you send super chats a lot, so you get a pass.
But otherwise you'd be banned.
Right.
$4.99 from 7. The man going out of his way to help you because he assumed you're incapable is an example of what my friends call something euphoria.
I think that's
gender affirmed.
I think that's an emoji. Is what that OBJ is.
Oh, euphoria. Oh, I see. Maybe it's gender euphoria.
I see. It's like when somebody calls you a misogynistic slur, And you're like, thanks for gendering me correctly, but also please don't call me that.
So
That happened at one of my old
at
jobs several times.
I'm past that being like, I don't care about that anymore from that sense. But like when you were saying, oh, you weren't sure about this guy coming out and help you load in the car or whatever, because he's like, I've come to terms with the fact that some people are sexist, and I might as well rinse it. Like if someone's like, oh, can you handle that, love? Oh, I'm just like, no, hold it for me. Like
there are times where I do that too. But with like something like this, there are these like small bags that, I mean, 40 pounds is not that much. And we're just like, it kind of made it more inconvenient that it was like, let's rearrange where everyone is so that I can help load instead of you. And it's like, this isn't that serious. Like when I told you before, I had somebody stop and load a mattress for me in the middle of the street. That was a nice like casual sexism thing, but where I was like, I'll take that one. But this one was just like, it's not convenient.
Especially when they're trying to be sexist, when they're trying to be a little bit male chauvinist, and I'm just like, yeah, you do it then.
Yeah, right.
And then it kind of takes the power away a little bit, because it's like, I'm just going to go on my phone then while you load the car for me. Like, right. That's fine.
We've got here €5 from Ifya. I don't really know how to say that name. Love to see you two hosting together. Thanks for all your work on the line. Is there any chance we'll get show specific mugs at some point? Yes. So there's definitely going to be specific merch for each show, and we are thinking of doing some special like birthday things maybe. So there will be lots of merch stuff coming down the line, especially this year. But we're sticking with some general stuff for now. Seeing how it goes, seeing how we like Fourth Wall, and yeah. So let us know how you guys like your stuff.
$4.99 from John Doan. Hello, my favorites. Hey, Atheist Punkunk 666 is here to learn from, once again, from the team Trans, sending love and air hugs from Southern California. Thanks, John.
Right on. Thank you. We got $10 from Jacob Hicks. Hi, I wish I had the courage to call, but what would you say to someone who's confused but feels cis adjacent? I love you both. #Team Arden. I know a couple of people who identify as non-binary, but are not interested in medical transition in any way, and largely are read as like cis women, for example, the two people who I'm thinking of specifically. I think there's lots of people who probably feel not cis, but aren't interested in medical transition and think it's just easier to kind of, I mean, there's definitely a utility in, letting people assume you're cis. I think there's utility, and it's also like a unique form of oppression at the same time. It's kind of a weird mix there. But yeah, I mean, I'm not the arbiter of what genders are valid, so if you feel like you're maybe not completely cis, but you're not interested in transition, that's okay.
My advice is try things out. Like, tell some people you trust that you're exploring stuff, and then just explore stuff and see how you like it.
Yeah, I think we've given this advice like 300 times, but just like trying not to make it, I'm transitioning, so I'm getting laser hair removal, and just be like, I don't like my facial hair. I'm going to at least get laser hair removal. Whether that means in the future I take hormones or identify as a woman is completely irrespective to the fact of me wanting this one thing.
I'm going to upgrade to a vagina and then see what I feel like from there.
That's my plan.
Yeah.
Also, the calendar for that came out, but I'm in a really annoying predicament. I don't have a valid passport, and to get a valid passport, I need my birth certificate. So tomorrow, I'm going to send out the forms, which means 3 to 8 weeks to get my birth certificate, and then 3 to 6 weeks to get my passport. Then I can get a date in 2025 if they're not all taken by that point. So a little bit frustrating that I'm in that position, but I've done this to myself. I put off getting a passport. It should have been obvious that I would need a passport to apply for this, but I didn't think about it.
I remember telling you to get a passport, like when we first met.
Yep.
3 years ago. 4 years ago.
So long. Aw.
1 billion check sex from Naresh. I would strongly consider the yellow line hoodie if only I didn't already have more hoodies than an introvert like me needs. I also have a lot of clothes now that I'm washing everything and going through grandpa's stuff and finding that much of it actually looks alright and fits me. So I guess I just have these super chats and pat. Good job on the hoodies. They look fire. Thanks, Naresh.
Thank you.
What you could do is keep all of your granddad's clothes, buy the line hoodies, and then create loads of weird stuffed like mannequins out of your other clothes and leave them around the street at night. Just a suggestion.
I know I get the hoodies are well, I guess you're not complaining about their price. I think they're really cool. I get why they might be prohibitive for some people.
I'm complaining about the price. They should be double the price. It's what they were.
Honestly, the cost to manufacture an all-over print hoodie is pretty high. So,
yeah, I bet.
20 Canadian dollarinos, allegedly, from Derek Bunyak. Katie, you should have your own mug and put your cat's tail butt as the picture. How your cats walk across your screen. Cats will sell better than Forrest mug. Love you both. And sorry, but I'm Team Mayo.
We could have a Poppy mug, actually.
We should have.
I would whore out Poppy's face for a mug.
I would love that. We will. Maybe that'll happen. Who knows? Tune back in a couple months' time.
$4.99 from Ramona. Haven't caught the show live in a while, and I'm happy to catch one with the original duo, OG team. Great show today, and of course, hashtag Team Katie. Thank you very much, Ramona.
It was a good show. I had a good time today.
Yeah.
5 pounds from Sean Isherwood. Thanks again. The exam was on an area that's part of my research today, so I would have passed, which was all I needed. That bit stings. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And definitely, like we said, I think doing what you feel you need to do to get resolution from that is what really matters.
Not dwell too much. Also, you never know, because sorry, I'm going to make this about me now. I once had a maths exam where they set a load of impossible questions, and every single person in the entire year of like 250 people sitting this maths exam failed it. And then the maths department wrote the engineering department an apology saying, "Oh, sorry, our exam was so impossible." So they just graded everyone up. So I only got like, you had to answer like 7 of the questions or something, and I got like 1.5 of them right, and then that translated to 60%.
Oh my god!
for that module. So yeah, it was something. I got really high marks on all the other ones, by the way, just so everyone knows. Anyway, next. We're on the next. $10 from Aubrey. When I talk to cis people online, they keep saying I should go read my Bible. I am, and this one chick does a clutch 360 circumcision to save someone from God's murderous wrath. This book is wild, fam.
It took me way too long to conceptualize what a clutch 360 circumcision was, but that's really funny. Yeah, the Bible's fucking crazy. Oh, have you seen Lil Nas X released a song that was like, "I'm coming back like Jesus" or something? I haven't listened to it, but I've been watching Christians on Instagram and TikTok lose their mind about it.
Oh, I bet.
And it's just so wild to me because I'm like, I don't know how you can sit here and I don't know. Anyone who defends the Bible, if you're a Christian and you're like, "Oh, the Bible was written by man," I don't know what foundation you have for your belief, and that annoys me, but like I can at least respect you as a person. People who value the Bible, I'm like, have you read it though? Like, for real? I had to read the Bible so much in school. Crazy. 100 Czech Secarinos. Oh wait, no, did I do the last one?
No, I did it. I had to say cool. 360 no scope circumcision.
Right, yes. Today's Naresh approved life hack. You can't, quote, go read your Bible if you have no Bible. Yes, this is sort of 5D chess that goes on in my brain. Like and subscribe. Do like and subscribe. See, I have a Bible app on my phone because I had to take Bible class every day in elementary school. And so I don't remember the whole Bible by heart, but sometimes people will say things and it'll like trigger like 18 memory spirals and I'll have to go look it up. So I just need it on hand at all times.
Saying about how crazy the Bible is, I've been arguing with this guy in DMs for a little while on Twitter, and he believes in all the Bible, but he hasn't read it. And look, I haven't read the whole Bible cover to cover, but I know the things that atheists always bring up. And he came out with a quote of something like, unlike atheists, God doesn't condone rape and murder. And I was like, oh, does he not? Have you read this bit of the Bible, like about Lot's daughters, where he offers them up to be raped and God says it's a good thing? Or the bit where he commanded a genocide and he was just like, wow. God's super down with rape and murder. God invented rape and murder. Like,
he quite literally did, though.
Literally the OG rapist and murderer.
It is an unbelievable ball of frustration when people try to pretend that. I know Matt's been on a kick of this meme that goes around of people being like, oh, being anti-Christian is anti-woke or something like that. And like, Christianity is so far from caring about human rights. Let's not pretend that is a thing. Anyway, listen to you.
$5 from Audio Acrylics. Hashtag Team Katy spelt wrong. Thank you very much anyway. Got a shout out as I help make John Petrucci's amps, and I look forward to listening to you all every Thursday from Boogie. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm sorry for complaining about you spelling my name wrong.
I don't think I know who John Petrucci is, so...
He's the guitarist from Dream Theater, who me and the other caller earlier had a little nerd out. That is really cool. The guitar amp I have is the ex-guitar amp of the guitarist from Periphery. Fun fact. Anyway, next.
Neato. $5 from Charlotte. Thank you both. I'm usually past the internal struggle or whatever, but I don't know. The calls hit me hard today. Loved to everyone in chat and to the mods too. Yes, definitely love to the mods and to chat. Yeah, I think that's fair. Going through transition can be really difficult. And if every now and then you're like hit by a wave of emotions about how difficult that was, I think that makes sense. It's a very human response to those things.
£10 from Freakish Uproar. That sounds good. Maybe not the most serious question. What's each of your favorite cartoon characters growing up? Sorry I caught the show late. Have a nice night, Katy and Arden.
I'm such a nerd. I loved cartoons. There's so many. I mean, my favorite show of all time is a cartoon. That's Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I think probably, Zuko is my favorite character from that, specifically because his character arc is just so good. From like the shame and self-hating to being like, coming into his own and being like, fuck you to his dad or whatever. And I don't know, it was a really good character arc. I really like him a lot. But there are so many good cartoons and characters that would fit all of that. Probably Zuko is probably one of my top, though, of all time. Yeah.
I like Meowth from Pokemon.
You would.
Did you know, fun fact, the lady who voiced Meowth from Pokemon is a trans woman.
Oh, really? That's so cool.
That's I also love right.
That Meowth learned how to talk just by like reading books and listening to people. And it's like, wait.
Lusting after a Persian.
So you're telling me that every Pokemon is actively choosing not to learn how to communicate better. And that if they wanted to, they could literally all just like read a book and figure it out.
He was in love. He was in love.
Okay, so you have to be horny for it to motivate you enough.
You have to be horny and a library nerd. That's the only way.
Ooh, Matt asked poll, should I take Arden out for hot pot after the show? The answer to hot pot is always yes. Just informing you guys.
If and when I come to Texas, I'm up for it.
Oh, I love it.
This is you.
Oh, is it? Oh, $10 from Breadbox of Doom. Wonderful show as always. Finally got my Arden mug. I need to get out of the conservative hellhole that is Alabama. Any suggestions of where to go? I mean,
Not Florida.
Yeah, not Florida. A lot of states in like New England have pretty good trans laws. I know like Michigan has pretty good trans laws, and California is pretty good. I think probably the most reasonable thing to do is go to the place where you have those laws and at the cheapest cost of living, which would probably be like Michigan or something. But one of those like central Midwestern states in the north would probably be better. But I really don't know. I think Georgia's coming around a lot too, and I know Georgia's cost of living outside of Atlanta is pretty low. But once you get outside of Atlanta, it stops being as blue. So, that's a really hard situation. I think Georgia would be easier for you if you're in Alabama. Be a less huge move.
It's cold, but it's in English. But other than that, it's all right.
Yeah, I that's difficult though. Moving in general is hard. I've done a few big moves, and every time I basically had to give up all of my belongings to do it because it was like,
oh yeah,
going really far. I can't really take anything, so rebuild when I get there.
$9.99 from Jason Friedman. Do trans femme people find themselves struggling with toxic masculinity traits due to having been socialized as men? P.S. Arden Killer Queen rematch. I think, Jason, you should call in with this question because this is a spicy one, and even the framing on this is making me want to go off. I'm not going to be able to talk for less than 30 minutes on this, sorry.
So I'm reeling. I've seen Jason Friedman in chat before. I met Jason Friedman at a birthday. If you guys know Dan from Truth Wanted, his birthday party this past weekend, and I am just realizing that you are the same person this whole time. So that's awesome. Also, I will have to say Team Blue won at Killer Queen like way more than the gold team did. So the rematch would be to reclaim your honor because we dominated.
Talking about
it was an arcade game. Dan's birthday party was at this local arcade thing, and there's these two big machines where you could have teams of like 5 people playing a game together.
I went to a pub the other day, and they had an arcade machine, which was Streets of Rage, but with Sailor Moon characters.
Interesting. I don't know if I know Streets of Rage,
weird.
But...
And it was a metal bar in Portugal. It was really weird. The Streets of Rage is like Street Fighter 2 style graphics, but there's a side-scrolling, like the Turtles Super Nintendo game. Anyway, $5 from the Ben B. First time catching the OG hosts together, so I have to make my choice now. Hashtag Team Arden. Disgusting choice.
That's right.
Hashtag surviving Texas.
Sorry, I was trying to grab a super chat that I almost missed. Thank you so much for your Team Arden.
See that? She's working so hard to get every single super chat in. That's why we deserve more.
Wow, really? That's how you're gonna spin it. I see. We've got $10 from Cheeseburger. A bug question for Katy. Could we realistically grow really big bugs and spiders on a space station? What with the high oxygen and the lack of gravity? Also, your list of terrible tropes was delightful.
So, we could make a space station which had high oxygen, had an atmosphere that was more conductive to insects growing bigger. I don't know if insects can grow in zero gravity. I don't know if there's studies on that. It's like some things that we've tried to grow in space just can't do it because gravity, like with some plants, gravity is an essential component of their development. And like we don't even know if humans can grow in vitro can grow in the womb without gravity. That's kind of one of those experiments that's really interesting on paper, but actually is horrifically unethical. And like, I don't know if we should find out. So that's, but I mean, maybe it's less unethical with lice or something. But I don't know if there's a limit to their size based. Like, I don't know if they would, like the species we have today would just grow bigger, or whether we would need to give them 10 million years to evolve to being bigger. But interestingly, animals in colder environments tend to grow a lot bigger, and that's why loads of the animals in the super deep sea are absolutely massive. For example, the colossal squid, which is the biggest squid by volume, is really huge, and it only uses something like 20 calories a day. And the reason they're so big is because when they are huge, they can have a really efficient metabolism, and so maybe that is where we're going to find all the biggest bugs, because that's where we find the giant isopods at the bottom of the sea, which, interestingly too, have the enzymes to be able to digest wood. And although there's no wood down there, and they think that's just because, like, once in a blue moon, a whole tree might go all the way down kilometers to the bottom of the sea, and then they don't want to waste the thing. Anyway, maybe I should do a bug call-in show.
I know, this is definitely interesting. I have massive thalassophobia, so even mentioning the words deep sea triggers like a chill down my spine.
I know, I don't like the idea of it.
Yeah,
I learned about this cool thing, so I got to tell you this.
I like isopods, though. Talk more about isopods, I will listen all day.
Check out the giant isopods. I learned about this thing called brine pools, which are, I don't fully understand what it is, but it's some kind of fluid that's like water, but with super high salt content in. So it's really viscous and it's really heavy. And you get like literally lakes of it at the bottom of the sea. But like when you see it, it looks like a lake. It has a shoreline, it has like ripples on it and all this kind of stuff, but it's like underwater. So it's like two different things. And it's super salty. So the stuff that goes in there just like dies instantly, because it can't breathe, it has no oxygen, there's toxic shock and stuff. But all around the shoreline, there's loads of life, because there's bacteria which can just make energy from the salts and stuff, and then things feed on that. So there's this whole like food web that lives around these weird underwater pools. But because it's so toxic, like if just some of the shore crumbles away and this pool like leaks out, it just murders everything in the surrounding area. And like, what a crazy environment. It's like 2 kilometers at the bottom of the sea, in like some salt which kills you if you touch it. Like,
brine pools were, the first time I heard about them was because on SpongeBob, they'll go to the beach and there's like a body of water. And I remember as a kid being like, that doesn't make any sense. And then one time they'll do random episodes when I was a kid where they'd be like, here's a factoid about what makes this possible. And I don't think the writers or the artists were thinking about that when they made it, but they were like, oh, actually there can be underwater lakes because brine pools exist. So anyway, we missed this one from Kathleen. I missed this one from Kathleen. 10 Canadian alleged dollars from Kathleen Moncrief. Some delightfully wholesome calls today. Yeah, even the one that I thought was going to be combative was like really respectful, and like even if he ended up still disagreeing or having a different position, he just wanted to understand our position and what trans people are advocating for, which is huge because sorry, I know we're almost at the end of the super chats, and I know this has been a longer episode of Takis, but atheists, prominent atheists who are controversial, often comment on trans issues. Recently, I saw a few examples of that where they framed, oh, there's magical thinking on the left now in the woke gender ideology, and then what they would proceed to describe as our position is just so detached from what we're actually advocating for. So it's really nice when a Christian calls in and is like, hey, here's where I'm coming from. So I hope you aren't hostile towards me considering that, but I just want to understand what you're actually advocating for. That's really nice, because then at least if he disagrees on grounds of what we actually say, not on, well, they think that a man can just say words and become a woman. And it's like, that is such a dishonest characterization of what we're actually saying. But not that I even necessarily have a problem with what you said, but that's not what trans people are advocating for in most cases. So, yeah, annoying.
100 check sex, is that what we're calling them, from Naresh? Yeah. I had to get my birth certificate today. It took me like 10 minutes to walk over there and 10 more before I got it printed and handed over to me. 10 minutes to walk to the birth certificate registry. That is closer than I thought.
Yeah, you can't do that in the States.
Oh, yeah, for you, it probably... Oh, you said it took 3 to 6 weeks or something. For me, it took like 2 weeks, a week, something like that. So.
I have to mail in an affidavit to the state I was born in to their, I forget what office it is. It's some state office. And then they have to process that request and then snail mail it back to me. Despite living in the digital age, you can't do any of this stuff virtually or by a phone call and request. I have to mail in a slow, it's extremely frustrating and stupid. Not just better than Dawkins, babe. I'm saying he's better than Dawkins and Cosmic Skeptic. It's a shame because he used to get a lot of credit for being so far lefty because he's a hashtag vegan. Oh my god, he cares about animals. But then gives credence to that bullshit.
Is this the Cambridge guy? Is that where
I don't know where Alex goes. He's British. Cosmic Skeptic. He's been a huge YouTuber for ages, and he went really hard on veganism for a long time, and then got flamed because he gave it up himself. Which is really funny.
So he, I got from vibes as soon as I discovered him. I knew that he'd have garbage views on trans people. But he won me over to veganism being the morally correct position with his arguments. Like, I know he is very controversial about it and inflammatory, but it is just right. Like, veganism is just a more moral position. Like, I'm not a vegan. I'm just more immoral than someone who is. But like. I'll accept that.
I think it's morally superior. I'm comfortable saying that.
Yeah, people are so offended by the idea that it's like not morally superior to not kill animals, to eat them. Like, of course it is. Like, just get over yourself. Just like no one's morally perfect. Like, yeah, sometimes I eat fish. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
People are offended. Like, just.
Mostly because there are a lot of vegans on the internet who are stupid and probably a bad representation of most people who are practicing vegans. But anywho, a 10 Australian dollarinos from Sony Ericsson, or Sunny Ericsson, not sure. G'day. Your show is helping me to understand myself better through my transition in my 40s. Thank you so much. # team fence sitters. I'm really glad that it was helpful.
I'm really not glad that you're a fence sitter. And I'm also not glad that Arden didn't keep up the accent for the whole.
I was so close, but I was like, nope, I'm not gonna risk that one.
No American can do both a good British and a good Australian accent. It's a genetic issue you have. You can at most do one.
So I used to do a lot of acting, and I used to do voices, and I was actually decent, but I don't do that anymore. And without being in practice, it is just embarrassing to even try. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna cringe at myself. No thanks.
$4.99 from Megan Marie. G'day. What are some resources I could use to learn more about trans and gender issues? I guess it depends from what perspective. If you want to learn about like trans rights and stuff, a book I would recommend is The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay, which is very good. And if you don't like reading books, then read my website blogs. And if you don't like me, then there are lots of organizations like Gendered Intelligence and Stonewall and stuff, which do kind of fact files and help sheets and stuff. But the best place to just learn about trans stuff is to ask trans people questions. And that's what this show's for.
Yep. I co-sign all that. I don't think I have anything to add, actually. So thank you so much to Megan Marie. That is, in fact, the last super chat of the day. So just do our quick little wrap up here. Thank you so much to all of our mods. Thank you to Jess for call screening. You did a great job. I know she was like, it's Grand Central Station here today. We had so many callers, and we got to most of them too, which is impressive. I don't think Takis has gone 3 hours in a very long time, so it's definitely a rare occasion for us. But thank you to all the viewers for watching who make the show possible. Definitely go, if you would like to support the Lion, you want to be a part of LionCon, which is now moved towards like the fall of this year. Go to patreon.com/callthelion. That is a huge way you can support us. We are starting to get into creating exclusive events there too that aren't just the Zoom call-in Q&As that we're doing. We're also going to be doing like produced videos there with people that'll be exclusive, and you get discount codes on merch and stuff. So if you would like to get into any of that or have your name scroll up on the side of the screen at the end, like it's about to happen shortly, patreon.com/calltheline. I also see Alyssa had to send in one after I left the super chat screen.
There's another one. Oh, Claire says she's been skipped. We did do one from Claire, I think.
We definitely did yours, Claire. The hashtag Team Katy. Have you seen the Red Hot Balls versus everything TikTok Reels? Mayo one was phenomenal. But unless there's another one. The one Alyssa said is, I live in California, and in the same country I was born in. My experience with getting a certified copy of my birth certificate was like Nourish, except I drove.
Wow.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad it was easy.
Of course you drove, you're American.
Okay. That is the end of the show, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Next week, it'll be myself and Hannah Reloaded. So if you want to watch that, come back here. And
did you know that electric eels are like 6 to 8 feet long? That's pretty cool, isn't it?
That is kind of cool. There's some big
bye,
electric snakes, water. Anyway, bye.
They're actually technically catfish. I never know if people can hear us.
Oh yeah, they can. Yeah, we can talk shit about them. We can talk shit about the patron producers. They'll hear it all.
They can communicate their sex to other electric eels with an electric signal. But that makes me wonder, are there any electric eels?